Welcome to Shredder Fanfic. Like, subscribe, and hype video. Join members to gain early access to new videos. The main character dies and wakes up as Clark Kent inside of Invincible. He is reborn as a Kryptonian and has all the powers of Kryptonians. What will he do inside of Invincible? Will he fight Omni-Man? Will he fight Conquest? Or will he fight Thrag? What will somebody with the powers of Kryptonian do inside of Invincible?
We could have been gods, Clark. I smiled grimly. You're not a god. Then I shot forward again, fists blazing with heat. And the sky became a battlefield. Chapter 37 Shattered Lines. POV Clark Kent. The sky bent under us, groaning with every blow. My punch landed square against Nolan's cheek, and for the first time since the fight began, I saw his head snap back. Blood spattered into the air like red mist, and for a fraction of a second, his stance faltered. His cape whipped violently, half burned and torn. I didn't let up. Another punch, this one to the ribs. I felt something crunch. Not enough to stop him, but enough to make him flinch. But then he was on me. His hand wrapped around my face, no finesse, just force, and he threw. I shot down like a comet, nothing but air and gravity and impact waiting for me. But something was in the way. Someone. Mark. He was still climbing up from where Nolan had thrown him before. I didn't even have time to cry out before our bodies collided in a midair crash that cracked the sound barrier. Pain exploded across my chest as our limbs tangled, and for a moment we tumbled together, wind screaming around us, nothing but motion and momentum and groans of pain. We hit the ground hard. Not as one but close. Dirt and asphalt shattered beneath us. The shockwave ripped a crater through a suburban intersection. Cars flipped from the blast. Windows blew out. Somewhere, dogs barked hysterically. I groaned, pulling myself out of the rubble, blood smeared across my lip. Mark lay a few feet away, coughing, spitting gravel out of his mouth. Next time, he wheezed, warn me before you use me as a crash pad. I extended a hand. He took it. We rose together. And without a word, no nod, no signal, we both shot into the air. Side by side. Mark's suit was torn across the midsection. His face bruised and bleeding. His fists clenched like he'd never let them go. We flew toward Nolan. He was waiting now, high above the city. Hovering like a storm cloud. His eyes burned, not with heat vision, but something colder. Disappointment. Resentment. Resolve. I spoke first, voice low and ragged from the last strike. You can still stop this. You think I've come this far for nothing, he answered. You think I didn't plan for this. Mark shouted next, fury raw in his throat. You're killing everything you ever claimed to love. Nolan didn't answer. He dove. And the sky shattered again. POV Cecil Stedman. Screens surrounded him. 16 angles. Dozens of satellites. Radar sweeps, seismic readings, heart monitors for every potential responder in a 100-mile radius. The main feed showed it in real time, 3 blurs of red and blue and white colliding high above the earth, scattering lightning and fire in their wake. He watched it all. Silently. Then slowly he turned. To Debbie. She stood frozen near the wall of the control room. One hand clenched around her sweater. The other pressed against her lips. She was pale. Her eyes wide. Disbelieving. But the screen told the truth. Debbie, Cecil said, quiet. Almost gentle. You shouldn't be here. You said you didn't know what happened to the Guardians. I didn't, he said, without flinching. Until today. She took a step forward. Her voice cracked. That's my husband. I know. That's my son out there. I know. You didn't stop him. We couldn't, Cecil said, calm as a scalpel. We never could. Nolan was too strong. Too fast. We watched him for years. Monitored him. Ran simulations. Every outcome ended the same. He turned back to the screen. But we didn't account for Clark. On one feed, Clark's heat vision sliced through a cloud, barely missing Nolan. On another, Mark slammed into his father's back with both fists, screaming something lost to the static. They're giving us a chance, Cecil murmured. A real chance. Debbie's legs gave out. She dropped into the nearest chair like a marionette whose strings had been cut. Her eyes didn't leave the screen. Nolan's fist connected with Mark's jaw. She flinched like she'd been struck herself. Her voice was barely a whisper. Why? Cecil didn't have an answer. And even if he did, he didn't think she wanted to hear it. Chapter 38 The Unforgivable Line. POV Clark Kent. The wind screamed louder than any voice could. Debris slashed past my face, sharp as razors, streaking red against my cheek. I could still taste blood in the corner of my mouth, metallic and bitter, but the pain didn't matter. Nothing did except finding him. Except stopping him. Except saving Mark. I had been only 100 yards away when Nolan grabbed his son by the face. There hadn't been a warning, no tell, no twitch in his jaw or narrowing of his eyes, just that sudden movement. One brutal, terrifying lunge. A father's hand closing around his son's face like a vice. And then they were gone. A streak of red and white and blue tearing downward toward the train station. I followed as fast as I could, every ounce of me screaming to close the gap. But I wasn't fast enough. God, I wasn't fast enough. I hit the air currents behind them, still warm, torn to shreds, and surged downward, pouring every drop of energy into acceleration. Below, the station loomed clean and glass-paneled, the platform already filling with civilians waiting for the late train. And that's when I saw it. Nolan didn't slow. Didn't hesitate. He flew through the train, dragging Mark's limp body in front of him like a human battering ram. Steel tore like tinfoil. Glass shattered in waves. And the people. God. They didn't even scream. They just ceased. One by one. Row by row. Passenger after passenger crushed beneath the wake of Mark's body as Nolan plowed through them, turning the train car into a crimson mist of pulverized flesh and metal and horror. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't even shout. Mark. Nolan finally came to a stop 3 city blocks later, Mark's body falling like a broken doll from his grasp. I didn't stop to think. Didn't weigh the odds. Didn't plan. I just chased. Harder than I ever had in my life. But the city was screaming now, sirens, screams, cries, crumbling structures, the whine of failing electronics. My ears were drowning in sound. Super hearing was useless. Too much. Too many lives ending, voices begging, pain everywhere. I clenched my fists, teeth grinding. No. Not now. Focus. I forced the noise down. Pushed it into a corner of my mind. Closed off my ears like slamming a door. The pain of silence was immediate, a ringing, deafening absence, but it was better than hearing what I'd just heard. X-ray vision, I thought. It flared behind my eyes, instantly bright, aching, layers peeling back from walls, concrete, wiring, beams of rebar. And then people. Naked outlines everywhere. Moving, running, screaming. Bones flickering in motion, hearts racing, blood rushing. I didn't care. I couldn't care. Not now. I swept the city in wide arcs, searching building by building, block by block. The world turned to organs and skeletons, the layers of flesh and cloth stripped away by my vision as I looked for him. For Mark. For Nolan. A flash 3 streets over. 2 figures. One limp. One tall. Towering. I turned, flying so fast the shockwave shattered nearby windows. I found them in an alley beside a collapsed diner, where a shattered delivery truck burned low in the corner. Nolan was standing over Mark, who lay crumpled against a dumpster, his limbs twisted wrong, his chest barely moving. I landed hard enough to crack the street. Get away from him. Nolan turned. There was blood in his beard. Splashed across his suit. Not his. Mark's. Everyone else's. Clark, he said, almost tired. You're making this harder than it has to be. Then stop making me. He took a step toward me. I raised a hand, warning him. Don't. You can still come with us, he said. You don't have to fight me. After what you just did. I shouted. You call that persuasion? That was a massacre. I showed him, Nolan said, voice rising. I showed him how little these people matter. How fragile they are. How pointless their lives are. I thought if he understood he'd stop clinging to them. You used his body to murder civilians. They were already dead, he said coldly. They just didn't know it yet. My hands trembled. The heat in my eyes flared again. You're not a teacher, I growled. You're not a protector. You're a monster wearing a hero's face. And yet you still call yourself Superman. I do, I said. Because I don't stand for you. He took another step forward. Last chance. No, I said. And the ground exploded beneath us as we clashed again. Chapter 39 Blood on the Tracks. POV Debbie Grayson. The screen was still playing. She didn't know how long it had been. Cecil had offered her a chair. Someone else had brought her water. The lights in the room buzzed overhead, humming faintly, like they could drown out the thunder outside. But nothing drowned out the silence inside her. Nothing touched it. She hadn't blinked in minutes. And still the footage rolled. It wasn't just footage anymore. Not to her. Not to them. Every camera feed in the satellite bank, every government surveillance relay stitched together by Cecil's team was trained now on one smoldering scar of the city. On a street corner where trains used to run and people used to wait. Now it was carnage. And in the middle of it, standing above the blood and broken steel, was her husband. Nolan. The man who kissed her cheek every morning. The man who held her hand when she cried watching those awful sappy movies he secretly loved. The man who made breakfast on Sundays when he wasn't too sore from patrol. The man who just dragged their son through a speeding train and turned an entire car full of people into nothing. Debbie didn't cry right away. She just stared. Still. Frozen. Like maybe if she looked hard enough, the scene would change. Maybe the screen would flicker and everything would go back. Maybe someone would pop in and tell her it was all just training footage, a simulation, a prank. But no one did. Only Cecil remained. And the silence. And the blood. I told you not to watch, Cecil said softly. He didn't look at her. His eyes were locked on the screens too. I had to, she said. Her voice sounded like gravel, like something had broken loose in her throat. Cecil folded his arms. There was no victory in his stance. No satisfaction in being right. Just the weight of inevitability. The exhaustion of someone who had feared the truth for years and now had to live with being correct. He's killing people, she whispered. Cecil nodded once. He is. And Mark, her voice cracked. He's just a kid, Cecil. I know. She gripped the edge of the table in front of her. Her knuckles were white. I knew something was wrong. I knew. I've known for months. He's been distant. Cold. When the Guardians died, I looked him in the eyes and I knew. But I didn't say anything. I didn't ask. Because you were afraid of the answer. She nodded. Then, slowly, she lowered herself into the chair. Her knees buckled slightly on the way down. I thought he was still in there, she said. I thought maybe if I just waited, he'd come back. She looked up at the screens. And at what her husband had become. Cecil didn't speak for a long time. Then, you don't come back from this, Debbie. She didn't nod. Didn't shake her head. Just sat there. Do you think he's trying to kill Mark? I don't think even he knows what he's trying to do anymore. And Clark? She asked. She hadn't met him. Not properly. Just glimpses on the news. Hushed mentions from Mark. He's quiet, Mark had said once. Smart. Strong as hell. But he doesn't act like it. Now she saw him. Now the world saw him. On one screen, Clark's heat vision cut across the skyline like a scalpel of light, sending Nolan reeling backward. On another, Mark stirred on the ground, barely moving, half-conscious, blood smeared across his face. Debbie's hands trembled in her lap. She reached into her purse. Pulled out a photo. One of the old ones. Nolan, holding Mark at 2 years old, both of them laughing. She was behind the camera, grinning so wide her cheeks hurt. It had been one of those golden summer days, the kind you didn't know were perfect until they were already gone. She stared at that photo for a long time. Then folded it in half. She didn't rip it. Not yet. But she didn't put it back either. She set it face down on the table. And turned back to the screens. POV Cecil Stedman. He watched Clark and Nolan spiral skyward again, a streak of red and blue tearing through a bruised cloud layer, heat trails forming behind them like twin comets. Every punch they traded echoed in seismic tremors the satellites could barely measure. Mark was trying to get back up. That part gave Cecil pause. Because Mark shouldn't be getting up. Not after that. Not after what Nolan had done. And yet there he was shaking, groaning, half risen, hands digging into the shattered pavement like he could claw his way out of death itself. "God damn," Cecil muttered. Donald appeared beside him, tablet in hand. "Sir," he said. "We've got backup routes cleared. Medical ready. Evac zones established. But if this goes on much longer..." "I know," Cecil said. Donald hesitated. "Do we deploy the failsafe?" Cecil didn't answer. On the screen, Clark landed a punch that sent Nolan crashing through an empty office building. The structure folded like cardboard. Mark, still struggling to his feet, stumbled toward the sound, blood running down his temple. Cecil exhaled. "No," he said. Donald blinked. "Sir." "We wait." Clark's still holding. "And if he can't?" Cecil's jaw clenched. "Then we see if Earth has anything left to bury." Chapter 40 The Sky Must Choose. POV Clark Kent. The air above the city was thinner now. Burned. I could smell ash in every breath, taste iron behind my teeth. Buildings below were blackened silhouettes. Fires burned unchecked across rooftops. The sky was bruised with smoke and dying sunlight. And still we fought. I was already bleeding, hairline fractures threading through my ribs, one eye swelling, a gash running down my forearm. But I didn't feel it. Pain was just another sound, and there was already too much noise. Nolan circled me like a hawk, his movements sharp and deliberate, his eyes colder than space. "You're still standing," he said, voice flat. "I'll keep standing. You shouldn't be able to. I've had a lot of practice being underestimated." He flew at me. I met him halfway. The impact cracked the sky open. Our fists collided with the force of tectonic plates. Nolan snarled, spinning into a hook that caught my jaw. The world tilted. I barely caught his second strike, redirecting it as I spun beneath and slammed my elbow into the base of his spine. He flinched. Not much. But enough. I followed it with a straight punch to his face that sent him reeling backward through a billboard and into the skeletal remains of an office tower. Concrete and steel rained down, thunder in every direction. I dove after him. He caught me mid-air, fist like a piston against my stomach, and hurled me upward straight into the stratosphere. For a second, the stars blinked around me. Cold. Silent. But I turned mid-flight and shot back down. Faster. Harder. The sound of my descent ripped clouds apart. I hit him with everything I had. He cratered into the pavement, the street erupting in a ring of destruction around him. He lay still. Just for a breath. Then rose. Of course he did. We hovered again, two figures against a red-black sky. My chest heaved. Blood ran from my nose. His lip was split, and his knuckles glistened with a sheen of red. I spoke first. "Still think I'll join you?" His face was unreadable. "You're strong," he said. "Stronger than I expected. Smarter than I hoped. You'd be a prince among Viltrumites." "I'd rather die." "You will." I barely had time to raise my arms before he charged again. POV Mark Grayson. I shouldn't have been conscious. I could barely stand. But I kept climbing step by step, hands shaking, lungs fighting to breathe. Dad and Clark were high above me, just flickers of light and shockwaves carving the sky apart. Their silhouettes looked like gods. It made my stomach twist. Because one of them was still my father. And the other? He was everything I used to think Dad was. I stumbled toward the edge of the rooftop, blinking through blood and sweat. Then, gathering everything I had, I shouted up into the sky. "Why?" The fighting paused. Barely. A hesitation in their patterns. A fraction of breath. I shouted again, voice cracking. "Why are you doing this? Why kill the Guardians? Why kill Mom's trust? Why kill people you claim to care about?" Nolan didn't turn at first. But eventually he floated down to my height. Clark stayed back watchful. Nolan looked at me. Really looked. And for the first time, I saw something under the surface. Not guilt. Not sorrow. But doubt. Faint. Flickering. Like a candle's last gasp before going out. "I tried to prepare you," he said. "You lied to me. I gave you time. You murdered a train full of people." I screamed. "You held me like a weapon, and why? Why would you do that to your own son?" Nolan's jaw clenched. "Because you needed to see what they are." "No," I said. "That's what you are." Clark landed softly beside me, eyes locked on Nolan. "You're not saving this planet," I said, voice low now. "You're just breaking it. And if conquering it means turning into you." I shook my head. "Then I want no part of it." For a moment, silence fell. Clark stepped forward, voice steady. "You can stop now," he said to Nolan. "Right here. Right now. End this. Walk away. Tell your people Earth isn't worth the fight." Nolan looked between us. Then laughed once, a bitter sound, like rust being scraped off something old. "It's already too late." And he lunged again. POV Clark Kent. I intercepted him in mid-air. The fight resumed. No longer brutal. No longer strategic. Just raw. We pummeled each other through rooftops, slammed into water towers, tore through city scaffolding. The air cracked with every hit. Blood flew from both our mouths. He was older. Meaner. Stronger. But I had something he didn't. I looked over my shoulder at Mark, still standing, bruised and shaking but standing. And I knew. He'll keep standing too. I turned back and drove my fist into Nolan's chest. And this time, he staggered. Invincible, what if I am Clark Kent? Chapter 41 The part that was real. POV Clark Kent. His punch tore through the air, wild and vicious, more animal than soldier now. He clipped my jaw, and I spun from the impact, boots carving a molten path across asphalt as I skidded to a stop. But I didn't fall. He was breathing harder now. Shoulders rising. Blood leaking from his temple, his chest rising and falling in deep, rattling heaves. Nolan, I called out. You're not fighting for your empire anymore. He didn't answer. He charged instead. I rose to meet him, my fist cracking into his ribs, his into my shoulder. We spun midair, locked in a storm of fists and fury. And all the while, he remembered. POV Nolan Grayson, in flickering memory. The grass was long that summer. Debbie laughed as Mark chased butterflies near the edge of the orchard. The boy had barely learned to run without tripping over his own feet. His hands were always smudged with dirt. His smile too wide. His laugh too loud. He loved everything. And Nolan had stood there watching, arms crossed, silent. Trying not to love it too much. Viltrumites didn't love. Not like this. Not openly. Not deeply. But still, he had crouched down when Mark ran to him. He had lifted him into the air. He had listened as Debbie said something soft, something mundane about apples. And for a moment, he had believed it. This could be real. Present Clark vs Nolan. My punch slammed into his gut. He grunted, buckled, caught himself mid-spin. His knuckles found my face. My vision blurred. I blocked his next attack, spun into a backhand that cracked his jaw. He roared. You don't understand what I gave up. I roared back. Then why are you trying so hard to pretend it meant nothing? He came at me again. Harder. Wilder. Nolan's memory orbit, years ago. The first time he saw Earth, he hated it. Too green. Too soft. Too loud. But then there was the first sunrise he saw with her. Debbie, wrapped in a blanket. A cup of coffee warming her hands. She had leaned her head on his shoulder like it belonged there. And he had let it stay. 4 hours. He hadn't thought of Viltrum once that morning. Not once. Present fight, downtown. We crashed through another building, glass exploding in every direction. People were fleeing below, blurs of movement in my X-ray vision. Screams I couldn't process, not with this much blood pounding in my ears. He lifted me over his head and hurled me through a bridge support. I hit the ground rolling and came up fast, slamming both fists into his sides before he could turn. He reeled. I didn't stop. You could have stayed, I yelled. You could have chosen us. His eyes burned. I did. He launched forward, no form, no style. Just pain. He tackled me into the clouds, fists raining down. Nolan's memory hospital room. Mark's first broken arm. He'd cried for hours. Nolan had stood in the hallway, fists clenched, helpless. Debbie had looked at him then, not for strength. Not for wisdom. Just for her presence. And he had stayed. He had held his son. And whispered, "You're going to be okay," even though he didn't understand why it hurt so much to see him like that. Present high atmosphere. My heat vision lanced across his chest. He screamed and barreled into me with both hands, grabbing my cape, yanking me into a nosedive. We crashed into a mountain peak, snow exploding in every direction. I struggled to stand. He staggered. Then he fell to one knee. Chest heaving. Eyes wide. "Why can't I?" he gasped. "Why can't I finish this?" I stood slowly, fists still clenched. "Because you don't want to." He looked up. "You've already made your choice. You made it when you stayed. When you held your son. When you kissed your wife and thought maybe it could last." He looked at his hands. Shaking. Bloody. "No," he muttered. Then again. "No." His voice broke. And for the first time in all these months, he looked afraid. "I don't know who I am anymore. I didn't move. Didn't strike. I just watched him as the war inside his chest clawed its way to the surface. And somewhere far below, Mark stood watching too. Waiting." Chapter 42 The Things You Leave Behind. POV Clark Kent. His hands were shaking. Not from exhaustion. Not from pain. But from doubt. And for Nolan Grayson, doubt was a wound no one else could see but him. It wasn't a cracked rib or a split lip. It was something deeper. Something that broke without blood. We hovered there in the thinning air, my chest heaving, his shoulders slumped. I could hear his breath stutter in his throat. Could see the tremble in his legs, the sway in his stance. He'd spent years believing he was unshakable. But it only takes one hit at the right moment. I gave it to him. A clean punch. Straight from the shoulder. Not angry. Not brutal. Just, final. It struck him in the center of his chest and knocked him from the sky like gravity had been waiting for an excuse. He fell fast. Not fighting anymore. Not even flailing. Just, falling. He hit the ruined pavement with a crash that cracked the surrounding street. Smoke and dust billowed up, and for a moment, I hovered alone in the sky, watching the crater settle. And then I heard it. "Why?" Mark's scream tore up from the ground. POV Mark Grayson. I didn't care that I could barely stand. Didn't care that my throat was raw or that my face felt like it had been hit with a cinder block. I stumbled toward my father's fallen body, hands clenched, vision blurry with tears and rage and disbelief. "You said we were better." I screamed. Nolan didn't answer. "You said we were supposed to protect this planet." Still nothing. "You told me everything you did was for the mission. For me." But it was a lie, wasn't it? All of it. He groaned, lifting his head slightly. His face was a mask of ruin now bloodied, tired, defeated. "I loved you," I said, voice cracking. "I believed you." Silence. And then barely audible. "I know." I turned away. Because I couldn't look at him anymore. POV Debbie Grayson. She wasn't screaming anymore. That part had passed. She wasn't crying, either. Her eyes had gone dry a long time ago. Dry and wide and cracked open by things she never wanted to believe. Cecil stood beside her. Neither of them spoke. They just watched the feed. Watched Nolan fall. Watched Mark scream. Watched Clark stand over them both, his cape torn, his arms heavy at his sides. "He hit him like he was putting down a weapon," Debbie said quietly. Cecil said nothing. "He could have killed him." "He didn't." Debbie leaned on the edge of the console. Her hands were trembling again. I don't know if that makes him merciful or naive. Cecil watched the screen with narrowed eyes. He made a choice, he said. And Nolan finally felt it. She looked at him, bitter. You mean Clark? No, he said. I mean Nolan. On the screen, Nolan tried to rise again. Just an inch. Just enough to lift his head. And then he collapsed. The dust settled. The fight was over. But the war wasn't. Not yet. Chapter 43 What We Choose to Save. POV Clark Kent. Mark's voice cracked as he looked at me, eyes sunken with the kind of emptiness you don't fix by patching wounds. What do I do now? He wasn't asking the world. He was asking me. I turned from him slowly and looked down at Nolan. There was nothing left of the man who stood over Earth like a god just an hour ago. He was kneeling in dust, cape torn and trailing, shoulders hunched forward like someone waiting for judgment not from us, but from himself. He didn't ask for mercy. He didn't apologize. He just looked at me. Eyes sharp and hollow, bruised, breathing ragged. I stared back. And I waited. Killing him wouldn't be hard. A single pulse of heat vision. A single punch. He was tired now, body battered, breath hitching every few seconds from internal injuries I didn't need X-ray vision to feel. If I wanted him gone, permanently, I could do it. But we both knew I wouldn't. Because despite everything, despite the blood on his hands, despite the crater he left in Mark's heart, I knew what was coming. Viltrum was coming. Not today. Not tomorrow. But soon. And when they did, Earth would need more than strength. It would need him. So I spoke. Leave. Nolan's eyes flicked up. Leave Earth. Now. Mark didn't say a word behind me, but I felt him shift, startled, confused. Nolan's jaw worked once, like he might argue. But instead, he asked something unexpected. I might be selfish, he said, voice raw, but, can I ask you to take care of him? His eyes shifted past me. To his son. The one he almost killed. The one he couldn't. I will, I said quietly. I didn't plan to stay. Not this long. Not like this. I know. His shoulders slumped further. I thought I could do both, he murmured. Be theirs and still be Viltrumite. And you couldn't. No. I took a breath. My ribs protested. You can try again. Somewhere else. Nolan rose slowly, cape dragging. His body shook as he stood tall again. Then he nodded once. Thank you. He looked at Mark again, just a glance, and lifted off. No flash of power. No sonic boom. Just a man disappearing into the clouds. Mark didn't move for a long time. And I stayed with him. Quiet. Because there was nothing more to say. Chapter 44 Just enough to say nothing. POV Clark Kent. The crater was still smoking when Cecil arrived. He didn't come in guns blazing. No squads, no black vans, no snipers on rooftops like I halfway expected. Just him. A dark coat fluttering around his legs, a cigarette burning low between his fingers, and that same tired calm he wore like armor. I was standing at the edge of the wreckage, watching the sky where Nolan had disappeared. I didn't turn when I heard Cecil's boots crunching through glass and gravel. I didn't need to. He stopped beside me, far enough not to crowd, close enough to talk. Where is he? He asked after a beat. Gone. He didn't ask where. Didn't press. He lit another cigarette off the butt of the first, slow and practiced. Mark. Alive, I said. shaken. He's tougher than he looks. We stood in silence for a while, just the wind shifting ash and the soft hiss of settling ruin. I don't suppose, Cecil said finally, you feel like giving me the play-by-play. No. That's what I thought. He didn't sound offended. If anything, he sounded resigned. I don't need all of it, he said, voice low. Just enough to know if Earth still has a chance when the next one shows up. I said nothing. I'm not looking for speeches, Clark. Not asking for your file, or your real name, or what planet you fell out of. All I need to know is whether I should start stockpiling nukes, or start sleeping again. I glanced at him, just for a moment. You shouldn't sleep either way. He took a long drag. Exhaled through his nose. Noted. Another silence. Longer this time. I've seen some things, Cecil muttered. But what you did out there, against him. That wasn't just power. That was control. I didn't answer. You've been holding back. For a long time. Still, I said nothing. He looked at me now. Not directly, but sideways. Calculating. You're not like him. That's the point. You gonna stay? I raised an eyebrow. You planning to run? No, I said. But I don't work for you. I figured. He flicked the end of his cigarette into the wind, watching it disappear into the ash. You're not gonna tell me what he said at the end, are you? No. Cecil nodded. Like he already knew. Well, he said, turning to leave, if you ever feel like talking, you know where to find me. I won't. He chuckled dryly. I know. And then he was gone. Just like that. I stayed at the edge of the crater a while longer, watching the smoke curl up into the sky, until even that started to fade. Because the truth was I hadn't said nothing. I'd said exactly what he needed. Just enough. And not a word more. Chapter 45 In the quiet that follows. POV Clark Kent. The street was quiet now. Empty. Not silent, never truly silent, but drained in the way places are after something too big, too fast, and too loud just passed through. The ash still lingered, light as dust on our shoulders. Mark hadn't spoken much since we left the crater. Neither had I. Sometimes silence is the only language that doesn't break. His house looked the same from the outside. Same porch. Same crooked step. But when we stopped in front of it, I saw the way he stared, like it didn't quite belong to him anymore. Like nothing did. He shifted awkwardly, then said, Cecil wants to work with me. I looked at him. He told me. What do you think? I paused. He's not perfect. But he means it. And he needs people like you. Mark didn't answer right away. His jaw was tight. His knuckles flexed against his thighs like he wasn't sure whether to clench or let go. I'll do it, he said finally. Not for him. For everything else. I nodded. Then, quieter, he asked, could you stay over tonight? His voice wasn't weak. Just honest. Yeah, I said. Of course. He led me up the steps, but paused at the door. I need to talk to Mom. Alone. Got it. I stepped inside as he climbed the stairs. The house was still, shadows stretching across the hardwood from the quiet lamplight in the kitchen. I settled onto the couch, kicked off my shoes. And turned off my hearing. All of it. He deserved that much. I picked up the remote and turned on the TV. The news was mid-broadcast, sound already playing. In what some are calling the most catastrophic superpowered conflict in modern history. Today, Omni-Man, Earth's most powerful known hero, was stopped in a brutal battle by two others, the young hero Invincible, revealed now to be his son, and a newly emerged figure calling himself Superman. The screen cut to shaky, zoomed-in footage of the sky. Me and Mark, blurs of red and blue and gold slamming into Nolan midair. The skyline fractured behind us. Each punch lit up the atmosphere. Nolan's face twisted, bloodied, breaking through a high-rise. They replayed it in slow motion. Though little is known about Superman's origins, the anchor continued, his role in halting Omni-Man's rampage has earned him immediate recognition worldwide. Another cut this time, the aftermath. Emergency crews picking through debris. Survivors being pulled from rubble. He saved lives, the reporters said. Even as Omni-Man killed. I muted the screen. I didn't need to hear the rest. I leaned back on the couch, stared at the ceiling, and waited. Upstairs, Mark was telling his mother the truth. And I sat in the stillness below, watching the world try to explain what it had just witnessed without knowing half of what it meant. Chapter 46, After the Sky Falls. POV: Clark Kent. The sun had no memory. It rose like it always did, clean, golden, honest. You'd never know it had burned down through blood and fire just a day ago. You'd never know the city below was still breathing through cracked ribs. Mark sat slouched on the porch steps, thumb tapping his phone screen. Not texting. Just spinning it through his fingers, over and over, like it might unlock something in his mind if he held it the right way. Then the phone rang. He stared at it a moment, eyes unreadable. "Cecil," he muttered, and answered. "Yeah. I'm fine," he said. "Where?" "Right. I'll go." He hung up and didn't move. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Alien," he said. Cecil picked up something out near the edge of the desert. "Wants me to check it out." "Just you?" Mark glanced up. "You already know the answer." "I'm coming." "Of course you are." We arrived within the hour. The air shimmered with heat, the dunes stretching wide and empty. There were no craters. No ships. Just wind and sun and distance. And a familiar orange figure floating just above the sand. Mark's shoulders loosened. "Alan." Alan turned, and the moment his single eye focused on Mark, he broke into a grin. "Hey," he said, floating forward. "I was wondering when someone would show up. I figured if I hovered long enough, you'd get the message." "You could have sent a signal," Mark said. "I did. Apparently Earth's tech is still bad at picking up the friendly frequencies." Alan looked over at me. Then blinked. "Who's this?" "This is Clark," Mark said. "He's been helping me. He helped stop my dad." Alan's expression sobered. "Yeah," he said. "I heard. It's all over the coalition relay. Some of the survivors didn't believe it. Others did." "What happened, exactly?" Mark's face shifted. "Not defensive. Just tired." "He left," he said. "After we fought." Alan nodded, looking at me again. "You're not from Earth either." "I'm not Viltrumite," I said quickly. Alan raised his hands. "Didn't say you were. Just not Earth native. You smell too stable." Mark made a face. "What does that even mean?" Alan ignored him. "I came to warn you," Alan said. "The Viltrumites won't ignore what happened here. If Nolan left his post, they'll come. They'll want to know why. They'll want to finish what he didn't." Mark crossed his arms. "Yeah. I figured." Alan studied him. "You okay?" "No." There was a long pause. Then, "I'm not gonna pretend I understand what that's like," Alan said. But if it means anything, my people fought them too. We lost. Nearly all of us. The ones that are left they hide. They rebuild. And I'm out here, trying to stop the next genocide before it happens. Mark's voice was low. If you ever need help, you've got it. Alan looked genuinely moved. I'll remember that. He hovered a bit higher, the wind teasing the edge of his red and white suit. So, what now? Mark glanced at me. Then back at Alan. I go back to school. Alan blinked. That's it. Mark shrugged. Gotta graduate. Can't save the world on an F average. Alan laughed. It was a real, surprised sound. And something in Mark's shoulders finally let go. Chapter 47 The Echo of Normal. POV Clark Kent. 1 week. That's all it had been. 7 days since the world cracked open and bled across the sky. 7 days since a son watched his father leave the planet in silence. 7 days since I made a decision I knew would ripple out for the rest of my life. The world had a short memory. Or maybe it was just eager to pretend. The school building looked the same. White columns, crumbling at the base. Banners promoting homecoming week, half scorched but already replaced. Glass repaired. Lockers scrubbed of dust and soot. It all looked clean again, reborn. Like nothing had happened. But it had. Mark stood at the school gate when I arrived, backpack slung low, hair damp from a too fast flight or a too late morning shower. His eyes were clearer, but they still carried weight, new weight. The kind you couldn't explain to anyone who hadn't watched the earth from the edge of destruction. Hey, I said. Hey, he echoed. We fell into step side by side, passing students who smiled a little too wide, who looked a little too long. Some recognized him. Others probably recognized me too, but didn't know why. We didn't speak right away. I let the silence stretch. Then, how's everything going? Mark didn't answer at first. Just looked ahead. Then down. I don't know, he said. I waited. I mean, I wake up. I go through the motions. But everything feels different. Not wrong exactly. Just, heavier. Like the ground's still shifting under me. I nodded. That's not going to go away anytime soon. He gave a half laugh, dry and short. Figured. We reached the main hall, where the streams of students started peeling off to different classes. Mark looked at me, adjusting his bag. I keep thinking, if I hadn't gotten powers, would he have stayed? Maybe. But I did, Mark said, voice quiet. And he left. You're not the reason he left, Mark. He didn't answer that. Just gave me a look, something caught between understanding and guilt, before nodding once and forcing a breath through his nose. Then he gestured down the west wing. This is me. I nodded. See you at lunch. Yeah. He turned and walked off into the crowd. I watched him for a moment. Then turned and went the other way, letting the tide of students carry me into a classroom that already felt too small for the life I was trying to live. Chapter 48 The Sound of Routine. POV Clark Kent. The intercom crackled just after third period. Attention students, came the assistant principal's voice, tinny and practiced. All classes will pause at 11:15 for an all-school assembly. Please proceed to the gym when directed. Attendance is mandatory. I didn't roll my eyes. Most of the room did. A few sighed. A few whispered. But no one looked surprised. Assemblies meant two things: stiff bleachers and recycled speeches. Maybe a slideshow. Maybe a guest speaker with awkward jokes. Nothing to fear. Nothing to brace for. Just routine. The bell rang. We filtered out into the halls like water through a funnel, the tide of bodies too familiar to feel crowded. Locker doors slammed. Sneakers squeaked. Someone spilled a bottle of water, and a kid 2 lockers down cursed. It felt normal. And that was what made it feel strange. A week ago, there had been a crater in the city big enough to swallow a block. Smoke rising from the skyline. Reporters muttering names: Omni-Man, Invincible, Superman. They never said our real names. They didn't know them. But now, there was this. A gym full of folding chairs and overhead lights buzzing against the ceiling tiles. Kids laughing. Phones glowing. Teachers reminding students to stay seated, to keep the aisles clear. The wrestling team in their leather jackets, clustered near the back. Mark was already there when I arrived. He was sitting near the middle, arms crossed, face half-shadowed in the flicker of a dying overhead bulb. I dropped into the seat beside him. "You make it sound like a funeral," he murmured. I looked around. "Feels like the opposite." "Yeah," he said. "That's the weird part." He didn't say more. Didn't need to. The principal walked out onto the center floor, suit freshly pressed, mic in hand. Feedback squealed once before settling. "Good morning," he said, smiling too wide. "First, I want to thank you all for being here today. This past week has been difficult. Confusing. For the city. For our school. For all of us." A few students shifted. A few more turned their eyes up from their phones. The principal continued, voice warm and steady. "But we're still standing. That's something. More than something, it's everything. It means we can keep learning. Keep showing up. Keep living our lives, even when the world doesn't make sense." He glanced out at the crowd. Today's assembly isn't about fear. It's not about mourning. It's about reminding ourselves what it means to be here. Together. In the same building. In the same breath. It was the kind of speech meant to reassure. And it worked. Not because it said anything profound. But because it didn't. It didn't try to explain. Didn't try to assign blame or outline the future. It just existed, solid and soft and unshaken. Like a teacher turning on the lights after a storm. Mark's shoulders eased beside me. Not all the way. But enough. After the assembly, we walked out into the sun together. People talked about homework. About lunch. About a new phone someone dropped in the toilet during second period. The air smelled like grass clippings and cheap cologne. No one stared. No one whispered. Just routine. It wasn't peace. But it was a start. Chapter 49, First Strike, Second Breath. POV Clark Kent. 1 month. That's how long it had been since the dust settled. Since Nolan vanished into the sky and left behind the bones of a world he nearly broke. Since I stood on a school stage pretending to be part of something small again. But the truth? We never really came back down. Mark and I had been out almost every day responding to fires, helping with construction, dealing with rogue tech, petty theft, collapsed scaffolding, and once, a guy with a mini black hole gun who tripped over his own shoelaces before we even reached him. It wasn't peace. But it was work. Good work. Today had started the same way. 2 hours into patrol. Sky clean. Air cold enough to feel sharp in the lungs. The city below us slow and steady. We floated together at rooftop height, our capes fluttering lazily in the wind. Mark was finally flying like he meant it, shoulders loose, control natural. His costume looked better too. New patchwork, clean lines, the gold on his chest catching the light just right. "How's the new stitching holding?" I asked, eyes on the skyline. He grinned. Haven't popped a seam yet. You're not throwing enough punches. Are you volunteering? Later, I said. He was about to respond when it hit us, that sound. High-pitched. Irregular. Not sirens, not radio. It sounded like reality cracking open. My stomach dropped before I even saw it. Midair 3 blocks east of the industrial district, a tear opened in the sky. It didn't explode. It unfolded. A shimmering green ellipse expanding outward, warping the air around it like heat off metal. It hovered just above warehouse rooftops, light pulsing outward like a beacon. Mark and I stopped in place, hovering, wind tugging at our capes. Oh no, he muttered. The first one stepped through a moment later. A flaxen. Green armor, chittering jaw, energy spear in hand. Then 2 more. Then 5. A dozen. A wave of them pouring through the portal in tight formation, their weapons already drawn, movements crisp and trained. They didn't hesitate. They never did. Ready? I asked. Mark nodded, already surging forward. Let's go. I followed. We hit the front line like thunder. My fist slammed into the first flaxen's chest plate, and it cracked inward like an eggshell. He flew backward into 2 more, scattering them like pins. Mark dove straight through the second wave, arms tucked, fists out, plowing into the center of their formation with a sonic boom. Energy blasts cut through the air around us, green bolts that hissed through the sky and shattered whatever they touched. One clipped my shoulder, searing through my suit and drawing a line of heat across my skin. I grit my teeth and turned into the bolt, diving low and smashing the shooter with a left hook that buried him into a rooftop exhaust vent. More poured through the portal. Dozens. Hundreds. They kept coming. They're better organized this time, Mark shouted, spinning midair to slam his elbow into a flaxen's face. They're adapting faster. Which means they'll age faster, too, I replied, kicking one into a wall. Their time dilation hasn't changed. They must have compensated for it, he grunted, dodging a spear thrust and retaliating with a palm strike that shattered a helmet. They wouldn't be this aggressive otherwise. I caught a soldier mid-leap and hurled him back through the portal. He vanished into green light, shrieking. Another lunged behind me with a blade. I turned, caught the edge against my forearm, and snapped the weapon in half with my grip. Mark joined me midair, breathing hard, face flushed. They're flooding us, he panted. We need to close it. I'm trying to locate the generator, I said, scanning the portal with X-ray. It's not visible on this side. They've shielded the tech again. They're learning. And we're not giving them enough reason to forget. He grinned, bloody and wild. We dove again. The city rumbled below us, the echoes of blasts, collapsing roofs, flaxens shouting commands in a language I'd never bother learning. Civilians had already fled, but the damage was growing. Every second the portal stayed open meant more troops, more pressure, more lives in the balance. A flaxen general taller than the rest, double-plated armor, a crackling war hammer in his grip, strode out from the rift like a king taking his throne. He raised the hammer, aimed straight for Mark. Mark didn't flinch. He caught the swing in both hands and held. The impact sent a shockwave through the air. Cracks split the rooftop beneath them. I darted in and struck the general's side with a full-force blow that staggered him but didn't drop him. He turned to me. His voice rasped through his helmet's speaker. Earth will not survive this cycle. You're welcome to try again, I said. I didn't wait for him to reply. I slammed him into the roof with enough force to crater the concrete. He roared, armor splitting at the seams, but his hammer snapped upward and struck my side with a burst of concussive energy that sent me reeling. Mark caught me midair, arm bracing against my back. You okay? Armor's tougher than it looks. We'll go for the joints next time. We turned together. The portal still pulsed. More Flaxens emerged. The war wasn't ending yet. Chapter 50 When the line holds. POV Clark Kent. The Flaxens weren't slowing down. Every time we knocked one back, 3 more spilled out of the portal to replace them, boots stomping in unison, weapons humming with that same eerie green energy. Their war cries weren't screams or words, they were rhythm. Measured. Trained. A clockwork invasion. And for every wave we broke, I could feel the strain creeping deeper into my muscles. Not exhaustion. Not yet. Just the warning edge of it. Like the wind shifting before a storm hits. Mark flew past me with a shoulder slam that folded a Flaxen soldier in half. He didn't stop to look. I followed with a burst of heat vision, slicing through a scaffold they were trying to mount as an elevated battery. Still more came. Then I heard it. The whistle. Piercing. Familiar. I turned and saw her. Eve. She streaked through the sky in a shimmer of pink energy, her suit already glowing like a nova, light dancing at her fingertips. Behind her, a ragged line of new heroes followed: Robot, Shrinking Ray, Duplicate, Bulletproof, Black Samson. The new guardians of the globe. The cavalry. Mark spotted them too. Oh, thank God, he gasped. Eve reached us first, midair. You two decided to have a war without calling anyone. Technically, I said, they started it. Her face was grim. Cecil briefed us on the way. We've been tracking dimensional surges all morning. They've got anchors buried under the portal now, stealth emitters. They're improving fast, Mark said. Too fast. Robot's voice crackled through our earpieces, sharp and level. They've adapted their time dilation field. They're using external wrist devices, small, circular bends on their armor. That's what's letting them operate longer here without accelerated aging. Mark's head snapped toward me. So we break the bracelets. I nodded. Let's break the bracelets. The Guardians fanned out. Eve descended like judgment, pink constructs sweeping aside Flaxen ranks in massive arcs, barriers, hammers, sweeping walls that boxed them into choke points. Black Samson charged through the breach she made, fists glowing, shattering 3 wristbands in quick succession. The soldiers behind those Flaxens immediately buckled, their bodies aging in seconds, skin wrinkling, limbs stiffening, weapons dropping from hands too brittle to hold them. It worked. They're vulnerable, Robot said. Target the bands. Ignore the armor. I accelerated, heat vision lancing out, not to kill, just to disarm. Each focused burst hit a wrist. Bands sparked, fried, and withered. Flaxens collapsed in place like puppets with cut strings. Mark followed suit, blasting downward with double fists, cracking a rooftop and snapping 2 wristbands clean off their mounts. The soldiers aged mid-motion, their bodies giving out in mid-leap. For the first time since the portal opened. The line broke. The Flaxens retreated. They didn't speak. Didn't shout. They just turned disciplined, immediate, and pulled back toward the portal as fast as they'd come. Some died trying. Most made it through. Then the portal pulsed once, twice, then collapsed inward like a ripple sucked into the void, folding into itself until nothing was left but a smear of green residue burned into the air. Gone. Mark hovered in place, panting. Did we win? Eve landed beside us, breathing hard. We didn't die. That counts. Robot's voice chimed in. Field is clear. Pursuit not advised. Mark looked at me. I nodded. That's enough for today. But in my mind, I knew, they'd be back. And next time, they wouldn't come with just wristbands. Chapter 51 Lines that cannot be erased. POV Clark Kent. The sky was starting to clear. Ash from the Flaxen incursion still drifted in high wisps, but the wind was strong today enough to pull the last of it eastward, away from the city. Enough to give the illusion of calm. Mark stood beside me on a rooftop overlooking the half-ruined street we'd just helped save, staring down at the twisted wreckage left behind. Burned-out flaxen armor. Smeared concrete. Singed walls. Debris that would take crews weeks to clear. He hadn't spoken in a while. Then without a word he flew upward in a slow, tired arc, arms loose at his sides, cape fluttering behind him like a faded banner. There wasn't urgency in it. No goal. Just motion. I stayed behind. Because I knew where he was going. And I knew who was going to stop him. The air grew thinner above the city. The wind cooler. Mark slowed near the upper cloud layer, barely 50 stories high, when the gust of impact stopped him. The immortal. He rose into view like a statue carved from the storm, broad, unmoving, face like stone. His white hair swept back in the air, eyes locked straight into Mark's. Mark froze midair. Something wrong? He asked, trying to keep his tone light. The immortal didn't blink. If you ever become like him, he said, voice deep and even, I'll kill you myself. The words hit like an impact louder than any flaxen weapon. Mark hovered still. His face twitched, just barely jaw tight, throat working. I'm not him, he said. You're his son. And I'm not him. The immortal didn't flinch. Neither was he when he landed. Mark's fists clenched at his sides. So what? You going to tail me for the rest of my life? I don't need to. There was no threat in his tone. Just promise. Then without waiting for a response the immortal turned. And left. Mark hovered in place long after the shape disappeared into the haze. And then slowly, shoulders sagging, he turned and flew home. POV Mark Grayson. The house was still. Too still. The windows were all shut, curtains drawn just enough to catch the golden afternoon light. The front door clicked softly as I landed and stepped inside. I let the screen door ease shut behind me, careful not to slam it. I didn't need to call out. I already knew where she'd be. The TV in the living room was on. Not loud. But just loud enough that I could hear the distant echo of a reporter's voice, drawn tight with tension and reverence. The footage on screen showed a wide, panoramic angle of the city skyline, a ripple of red and gold trailing behind two blurred figures. Superman. Me. And between us, fists raised, cape flaring like blood, him. Omni-Man. My father. My throat felt tight, dry in a way that water wouldn't fix. I stepped into the doorway. She didn't look away from the screen. She sat curled on the couch, legs drawn up beneath her, a half-full mug on the end table, steam long since faded. The light of the TV played across her face in flickers, burnt orange sky, silver clouds, trails of destruction. The reporter's voice hummed. Brutal footage still under review by Global Defense, exact casualties unknown. Omni-Man's disappearance continues to raise global questions regarding extraterrestrial governance and hero responsibility. She still didn't look at me. But I knew she knew I was there. I stepped further in. The TV shifted to a clip I hadn't seen. My father driving me into a train. My face bloody. His hands unmoving. The station exploding in 1,000 screams. I felt my stomach turn. My legs lock. She finally spoke. I keep watching it, she said quietly. I don't know why. I didn't answer. He used to bring me flowers, she said. When he came back from missions. The dumbest things. Half wilted. Dirt still on the roots. He'd laugh and say the florist tried to overcharge him, so he freelanced. I swallowed, but my voice barely came out. Mom. Her hand twitched on the blanket in her lap. I used to know everything about that man. The way he stirred his coffee. The sound he made when he read something funny. I used to think, if something happened, if someone else turned on us, he'd be the last one standing between us and the end. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were red. But dry. He was the end. I wanted to say something. Anything. But what the hell was there to say? He left me in a crater. He left her with silence. I'm sorry, I whispered. You don't have to apologize for him. I'm not, I said. I'm apologizing for not seeing it sooner. She looked away, back at the screen. It was paused now mid-frame. My body twisted midair. My father's fist drawn back. Clark rushing in behind him. A freeze frame of a family breaking. I'm still your son, I said. She didn't look at me. I know. It wasn't warm. But it wasn't cold, either. I sat down on the far end of the couch, hands folded between my knees. We didn't speak. The house was quiet. But she didn't turn off the TV. And I didn't leave the room. Because even if she couldn't say it, not yet she hadn't asked me to go. And that was enough. For now. Chapter 52 Strange Days and Stranger Smiles. POV Clark Kent. The sun was falling in long, golden lines over the rooftops when Eve found me. I was hovering just above city height, scanning the northern rooftops for any late-day trouble. The streets below were calm, quiet, even no smoke, no sirens, just the usual noise of a city exhaling after the long breath of a workday. And then a shimmer of pink energy streaked across the sky. Eve. She drifted in beside me, calm and composed, her pink flight field gleaming gently against the clouds. I nodded to her, half expecting her to keep going. She didn't. Hey, she said. Hey. I don't think we've ever really talked. I frowned. I guess not. It was true. Not just recently. Not ever. She was always in the peripheral circle's Mark's orbit, the Guardian's watch lists, scattered mentions in Cecil's files. I'd seen her work, sure. Impressive. Measured. Confident. But not once had we ever exchanged more than a few words. She didn't seem to care. You've been busy lately, she said. Same goes for you. She smiled wry, amused. I was thinking, maybe sometime we take a break from that. My brow furrowed slightly. What do you mean? A date, she said, so plainly it didn't register at first. A what? Eve tilted her head. You know, two people. Maybe food. Conversation. Something normal. I stared. And for a moment, just a breath, I was caught completely off guard. Not by her interest. Not entirely. I'd seen her date William briefly in the other version of this life. I knew her arc, even if it shifted. But we had never spoken, not really. I had never given her a reason. Yet here she was. Calm. Direct. Smiling like it made perfect sense. I rubbed the back of my neck. Yeah. Sure. That sounds good. She grinned. I'll let you pick the place. Then she turned in a slow, deliberate arc, gave a light wave, and streaked back into the sky, gone as fast as she arrived. I floated there, alone above the city, utterly confused. There was no build-up. No hints. Just Eve. Confident, radiant, sure of herself, asking me out like I wasn't a stranger she barely knew. For a second, the only explanation I could settle on was maybe she'd hit her head recently. Some post-battle fog. Repressed memory scrambling. Or maybe she just wasn't all there. No, I corrected myself. That wasn't fair. She didn't seem delusional. Just, forward. Still. It didn't make sense. The next day. The morning sun burned through the school windows with annoying brightness as I met up with Mark on the steps before homeroom. He was already waiting, tossing a ball of paper into the trash, his backpack half-zipped and crooked over one shoulder. "You're early," he said. "I've got news." He raised an eyebrow. I leaned in slightly. "I think I'm dating Eve." He blinked. "Come again?" "She asked me out. Yesterday. While I was on patrol." Mark stared. Then laughed once, short and surprised. "Wow. Okay. Congrats." I shrugged. "It's weird. I don't think we've ever really spoken before." "She's bold like that," Mark said. "It's kind of her thing." I hesitated. "You think something's wrong with her? I mean, mentally." Mark blinked. Then laughed harder. "Dude, are you serious? She just... I don't know. She doesn't know me." Mark clapped me on the shoulder. "Clark, relax. She probably just likes what she's seen. You've been a superhero for months now. You're all over the news. She's smart. Strong. Maybe she thinks you're worth her time." I let that settle. Still didn't sit right. But Mark was smiling. For real this time. That tightness he usually carried around his eyes? Gone for once. It hit me that just having something light to talk about again was helping him. I nodded. "All right." Just then, William jogged up, out of breath, arms full of folders. "Morning, dorks. You two look entirely too serious. Time for food." "Burger Mart?" Mark asked. "Always." We walked together down the block, the air cool and breezy, the smell of fry oil already drifting from the corner ahead. Inside, the booths were half full, the register line short. We slid into our usual corner, and Mark dropped his backpack with a thud. William dove right into conversation. "I mean, that footage seriously. You versus your dad? Clark in the sky like a comet? That was insane. Everyone's talking about it." Mark flinched. "Just barely. William didn't notice. I saw a slowed clip online where you punched him through 3 skyscrapers. People are already calling it the clash in the clouds. You should have trademarked that." Mark stood up. Fast. Abrupt. William looked up, startled. Mark's voice was flat. "I'll be outside." He walked out before either of us could stop him. I didn't move at first. Then William turned to me, face pale. "Was it something I said?" I sighed. "It's not your fault." William looked down. And outside, through the glass, I watched Mark lean against the wall, eyes shut, breathing like the past month had just hit him all over again. Chapter 53 What's Left Behind. POV Clark Kent. I pushed open the door to Burger Mart a minute after Mark left, my hand still tingling from the slam of it against the booth. The bell above the frame jingled gently. Too gentle for how heavy the air had become. Outside, the sidewalk shimmered under afternoon sun, still hot despite the breeze. I scanned the street, half expecting him to be standing just around the corner, sulking, pacing, maybe cooling off like he had 1,000 times before. But he wasn't. He was already in the air, gone. I saw the faint trail high up where the clouds hadn't yet closed behind him. I didn't follow. He needed space. Not words. Not yet. POV Mark Grayson. The wind felt sharp against my face, colder than it had been this morning. The heat had faded from the pavement, and the streets below passed in soft, indifferent motion. Cars. Trees. People. Life moving on. I touched down outside my house with more weight than I meant to, feet hitting the walkway like I didn't trust the earth to hold me. The front door was unlocked. Quiet inside. Too quiet. I stepped in, dropped my bag just inside the hall, and I heard her before I saw her. Soft at first. Then louder. Choked sobs. Muffled. I moved quickly, my chest tightening with each step until I turned the corner into the living room and saw her, my mother, on the floor near the coffee table, half curled, arms wrapped around her stomach like something inside had just split open and wouldn't close again. She was crying. Not loud. Not messy. Just broken. I knelt beside her instantly. Mom, hey, I'm here. She didn't stop crying. Didn't push me away, either. I pulled her against me carefully, arms around her shoulders, pressing my cheek to her hair. Her hands clutched at the front of my shirt, bunching the fabric like she didn't know where else to hold. I'm here, I whispered again. It's okay. But it wasn't. Not really. Her sobs came in waves, each one quieter than the last. I held her through them all, rocking slightly, not knowing what else to do. Every now and then, her breath would hitch, her hands would shake, and I'd feel the tears welling up in my own throat. I didn't want to cry. But I did. Quietly. Softly. She finally spoke after several minutes. Her voice was raw. Tired. Why did you have to push him away? I went still. My throat closed around the breath I hadn't taken. She wasn't accusing me. Not really. Not fully. But the words still felt like a knife between my ribs. I swallowed. My voice came out as a whisper. I didn't want to. Her fingers tightened. But he was going to kill people. He did. He would have killed me, too. She didn't answer. Just pressed her face against my chest and cried again, softer this time. Like she was tired of making noise. I didn't have a choice, I said. I just wanted to be enough to stop him. I thought maybe if I stood my ground, if I didn't give in. My words cracked. I bit my lip and closed my eyes. I thought maybe he'd stay. She trembled in my arms. And I hated that I couldn't promise her anything better. All I could do was hold her. Because whatever else was left of my father, it wasn't here. And we were together. In the wreckage of what used to be home. Chapter 54, The Space Between Names. POV Clark Kent. The sky had dimmed by the time I flew home. I didn't use the door. I almost never did anymore. I landed on the balcony, pushed open the sliding glass with 2 fingers, and stepped into the stillness of my apartment. The air inside was too quiet, too clean, emptied of the kind of chaos that came from people living in it together. There were no dishes in the sink. No half-folded laundry on the couch. No second toothbrush in the bathroom. No warmth in the silence. Just me. I peeled off the suit piece by piece, boots first, then gloves, belt, cape. I let them drop where they fell and moved to the kitchen to pour a glass of water. My reflection in the window stared back as I drank. Hollow eyes. Muffled bruises across the jawline. 2 lives. 2 names. In one, I had been Shredder. Just a guy. A nickname from some friend I barely remembered. No powers, no secret war, no legacy. And still, no family. No calls on holidays. No photos stuck to the fridge. Just long days and longer nights and an ache I couldn't explain even to myself. And now I was Clark Kent. Kryptonian. A god by any human metric. And still alone. The difference between the two lives wasn't the powers. It wasn't the costume, or the sky, or the fights. It was just this: in both worlds, I had no one waiting at home. No dinner table to return to. No voice calling out from another room. Just empty rooms. And the hum of the refrigerator. I looked down at the glass in my hand and tightened my grip until I heard the faintest crack of strain in the glass. Then I let it go. Set it gently in the sink. And stood there, staring out the window, wondering when I'd stop expecting the silence to change. POV Mark Grayson. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and old coffee when I woke up. Mom had been up early again. Probably hadn't really slept. I shuffled into the kitchen to find her already dressed, hair pulled back tight, sipping lukewarm coffee at the table. She didn't look up when I sat down. But she didn't flinch either. Progress. Morning, I said quietly. She nodded into her mug. Morning. We sat in silence for a minute. Then I took a breath. Sorry about yesterday. I didn't mean to leave like that. I just... It's okay, she said quickly. Too quickly. I let the words fall flat between us. She finally set her mug down and looked at me. Her face was tired, creased lines deeper than they used to be, but her eyes had steadied. She looked more present than she had in days. I watched the footage again last night, she said. Not all of it. Just pieces. I didn't respond. I saw how you fought. How you looked at him. Still nothing from me. I know you didn't want it to go that way, she said softly. I didn't, I whispered. She reached out and touched my hand. I stared at it. We can't keep replaying it, she said. Not forever. I looked up, eyes hot. You mean move on? She nodded. Not forget. Not forgive. Just, stop letting it eat everything else. I wanted to argue. I didn't. Because I was tired of fighting with the past. Okay, I said. She squeezed my hand once, then let go. It was bright when I stepped outside. Too bright. The air tasted sharp, like the wind had cleaned the world overnight and forgot to warn anyone. I started down the block, my bag slung low across my shoulder, trying not to think too hard about what I'd say if anyone asked how I was doing. That's when I saw her. Amber. Walking out of the bookstore across the street, a bag of paperbacks in one hand and her phone in the other. Her hair caught the light in a way that made my stomach twist, too familiar, too sudden. She looked up at just the wrong time. Saw me. And paused. Chapter 55: A Crown Made of Tides. POV Mark Grayson. Just as Amber turned and opened her mouth, some expression I couldn't read starting to form on her face, my phone buzzed. Hard. Sharp. The screen lit up. Cecil Stedman. Of course. I gave Amber a tight nod. Sorry. I have to take this. Her expression flickered something between disappointment and relief. But she nodded. I turned away and answered as I walked down the sidewalk. Yet. Cecil didn't waste time. Where are you? Just outside. Good. You're needed. It's urgent. And bizarre. I sighed. Define bizarre. You've been summoned by the Royal Court of Atlantis. That stopped me cold. Wait. What? Formal claim. Bloodline succession. Apparently, when a spouse in their ruling monarchy is slain in battle, the killer becomes the new consort. In absence of the killer, the responsibility passes to the heir. I stopped walking. Cecil. No. He continued like I hadn't spoken. Aquarius was a member of the Guardians. When Omni-Man killed him, that left Queen Area without a consort. They demanded Omni-Man. He's gone. Next of kin. Which is me. Yes. You want me to marry the Queen of Atlantis. I want you to avoid a diplomatic crisis. And if that means putting on some ceremonial armor and kissing a trident, then yes. I dragged a hand through my hair. You're insane. They've made it very clear. If no one honors the bond, they may withdraw from the global pact. You know what that means. War. Among other things. I'll go. Good man. I'm patching coordinates now. An hour later, the deep. I'd been to weird places before, other dimensions, orbital stations, inside a worm's digestive tract once, but nothing prepared me for Atlantis. The pressure suit they gave me was ceremonial, made of layered coral and silk-like scales that clung to my skin in weird places. The palace rose from the ocean floor like a skeletal shell, half cathedral, half sea creature, and the water glowed with bioluminescence that painted everything in shades of soft teal and gold. Queen Area stood at the center of it all. Regal. Cold. Radiating command with every breath. Beside her stood a man I'd never seen before. Pale blue skin, white hair drawn tight behind his head, armor elegant and ceremonial. Lethan. Her hand servant. And if the way his eyes never left her was any clue, very much in love with her. The ceremony began with a binding circle of light. The language spoken was Atlantean, but I understood enough to know what they were saying. In the place of the fallen, the heir will stand. Until challenged. Until claimed. They handed me the ceremonial blade. She held out her palm. I hesitated. Then I cut. A single drop of blood mingled with hers in the water. We were bound. Except not really. Because in that moment, I looked at her. Then at Lethan. Then back. And I realized something. She didn't want this either. Not really. It was duty. So I bowed low, to her, for the crowd to see, and whispered, "You love him." She didn't move. Didn't blink. But she whispered back, "That doesn't matter." It could. "You're the heir." "No," I said. "I'm the placeholder." Then I turned. To all gathered, I said in halting Atlantean, "I honor the right. But I do not claim the throne. I yield the bond." Gasps echoed in the chamber. I stepped back. Then turned toward Lethan and said loudly, "I name him champion. Let him challenge for the bond." Eyes turned. Whispers rose. Lethan was stunned. I cannot." "Yes," I said. "You can." Queen Area didn't move. But for the first time she smiled. Lethan stepped forward. The light swirled again. And the ceremony shifted. By the time I left Atlantis, I was no longer betrothed to a queen. But someone else was. And for once, I walked away from a throne not because I had to but because I wanted to. Chapter 56 Something Like Normal. POV Clark Kent. It was strange, the way a single morning could feel heavier than a battlefield. No alarms. No explosions. No alien invasions. Just quiet. Just time. Just me, standing in front of the bathroom mirror, trying to flatten a curl of hair that refused to be tamed. Of all the challenges I'd faced lately, fighting Omni-Man, holding back my real strength from the world, calculating the limits of what I could do without scaring anyone, this might have been the strangest. A date. With Eve. It wasn't a formal thing. She hadn't asked for a rooftop dinner or a high-stakes reveal. Just something normal. Something easy. And when I asked her what kind of easy, she said, dog park. Sandwiches. No pressure. So that's what I was preparing for. Sandwiches packed. Cold drinks. A blanket folded under one arm and a gentle ache in my chest that I couldn't quite explain. The thing was, I wasn't nervous because I didn't want to go. I was nervous because I did. And that hadn't happened in, well, 2 lives. The park was tucked into a pocket of the city I rarely visited, just past the old train yard, beside a neighborhood where people still trusted each other enough to leave their porch lights on. Fences were low. Trees were tall. And the sign out front read Wilkinson Dog Reserve in sun-bleached paint. Eve was already there when I landed. She wasn't flying. Just sitting cross-legged in the grass near the fence, watching a herd of dogs chase each other in a blur of fur and tongues and wagging tails. Her hair was pulled back in a loose bun. No costume. Just jeans and a pale red hoodie. Casual. Grounded. She looked more human than I'd ever seen her. And she looked at peace. Hey, I said, approaching from behind. She turned, smiled, and patted the blanket. You came. I said I would. She shrugged. You fly through satellites. I figured you might forget. I'm better at remembering food schedules than orbit routes. She laughed. And it was a real one. No force. No edge. Just clean and warm and short. I sat down beside her, setting the basket between us. The sun was high, the wind cool. A black lab trotted by with a tennis ball bigger than its mouth, and Eve tossed it without thinking. The dog didn't pause, just pivoted on instinct and launched after it like it had waited all week for that one moment. Did you grow up with dogs? I asked. 3, she said. At once. One was ancient. One was a maniac. The third hated everyone but me. I used to make little towers out of dog food when I was bored. Powerful architecture. Oh yeah. Very advanced. All edible. I unpacked the food: sandwiches, bottles of iced tea, some small cookies I'd grabbed without really thinking. Fancy, she said, opening her sandwich. You cook too? Sort of. I follow recipes and pray. You really are the full package, hey. I paused. Then, I don't think anyone's ever called me that. She looked at me, eyebrows raised. No way. Seriously. You're Superman. Only when I have to be. She stared at me for a long moment, and her smile changed. Softened. I think that's the most honest thing you've ever said. I didn't know what to say to that. So we ate in silence for a bit. The dogs played. People passed on the other side of the fence, tossing frisbees and chatting. No one noticed us. Or if they did, no one said anything. The park had this strange gravity, like a corner of the world that had decided to pause all the noise. I thought you didn't even know me, I said, halfway through my sandwich. Eve blinked. I don't. Not really. But you asked me out. She smiled again. Well, I asked the guy who's always 2 steps behind Mark. The one who fights like he doesn't want to scare anyone. The one who gets more press than politicians but still shows up at school like he's got a geometry test. That's not knowing me. No, she said. But it's enough to want to. That shut me up for a bit. I stared out at the dogs. A golden retriever flopped sideways into the grass and started gnawing on a stick twice its size. Another leapt over it like a hurdle. I didn't think you'd be interested, I admitted. She shrugged. Neither did I. I looked at her. Then why? Her fingers brushed a blade of grass. Because I've been around a lot of people lately who pretend they're fine. Who say what they think I want to hear. And you? She looked back at me. You don't say much. But when you do, it lands. I didn't have a reply. So she leaned back on her elbows and stretched out like she owned the patch of sky above us. And I realized I wasn't afraid. Not of her. Not of this. For the first time in either life, I wasn't waiting for something to go wrong. We finished lunch. The cookies were dry. The tea was too sweet. But she didn't complain, and I didn't care. When we stood, she dusted off her jeans and said, "Next time, I'm picking the spot." Next time. She smirked. Unless that's too fast for you. I met her eyes. I think I can keep up. She gave me a short nod, then took off, not soaring, not vanishing into the clouds. Just a soft arc through the air, slow enough that I could watch her go. And when I stood there in the grass, alone again, I didn't feel empty. Just full in a way I didn't know how to name yet. Chapter 57 What Comes with Fire. POV Clark Kent. It was hard to describe what it felt like to be happy again. Not just calm, or steady, or alive, but happy. The real kind. The kind that hits you on the walk home when there's no one around and nothing particularly good just happened, but something inside you hums like it knows you're safe. It took a long time to get here. A lot of blood, and screaming, and silence. But the truth? I think Eve had something to do with it. We weren't perfect, God no. We'd fought once already. About something stupid. Something like scheduling or boundaries or the way I never looked like I needed anyone. She'd stormed off. I'd hovered over a radio tower for 2 hours trying to figure out how not to break the sky in half from frustration. And then she came back. And kissed me before I could speak. Since then, things had settled. Heated, yes. Awkward at times, definitely. But real. And for the first time in a long, long time I didn't mind when people looked at us and knew. The school was gone now. Not metaphorically. Gone. A crater in the ground where it used to be. Alien incursion. We'd stopped it barely, but the building was done. No survivors lost, just bricks and memories. It felt wrong at first, until the district shrugged, handed everyone a certificate, and said, "You're done." So, we were. Graduated. Just like that. No prom. No yearbook. No final tests. Just ash, fire, and a diploma. We didn't complain. Not when college brochures were already flooding our mailboxes and the world kept ending every 3 weeks. Today. Burger Mart. Same table. Same fries. Mark, Eve, William, Amber, and me. We laughed. We talked. We didn't mention the day the sky burned or how Mark flinched every time someone mentioned Dad. It was almost peaceful. Almost. Then Mark's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. His face shifted. Cecil. He stood up without a word. Amber gave him a look. Again. He didn't answer. Just stepped back, mouthed sorry, and slipped out the door with a blur of air and motion. POV Mark Grayson. The sky peeled away like fabric as I shot through the cloud line, ears humming with the shift in altitude. Cecil's voice crackled in the COMM. We lost contact with the Martian research crew 10 minutes ago. Their last ping came from the shuttle surface drone. Something moved. Big. Fast. Not one of ours. Martians. Worse. Imposters. I clenched my jaw and pushed harder. The shuttle appeared in the distance, white and silver and still. No smoke. No sparks. Just wrong. I breached atmosphere with a sonic pop, adjusted trajectory, and slowed into a hover just above the surface of Mars. Below shadows. Moving. Not fast. Not slow. Just, watching. The astronauts had sealed themselves in a temporary rover shell, its outer surface already covered in a thin layer of red dust. The Martians weren't approaching. But something else was. I touched down lightly, kicking up a small burst of sand, and let my visor scan the field. No signals. No tech. But a shape, humanoid. Wrong proportions. Skin that shimmered in the thin Martian light. It saw me. And changed. Shifted. A white-suited human appeared where the creature had been. Then a second. A third. Shapeshifters. I didn't wait for them to strike. They lunged. I dodged, spun, dropped one with a low sweep, kicked the second into a crater. The third latched onto my back. I flew straight up, looped, and slammed them both into the sand hard enough to break something. The real Martians, guardians in cloaks of red, emerged from the rocks with energy lances. Not attacking. Just watching. One of them stepped forward. You protect the soft bloods. I nodded. He nodded back. Then turned and vanished. The imposters were gone now. Dead or retreating. I didn't chase. I checked on the astronauts still alive. Shaken. Safe. I gave them a thumbs up through the glass. They didn't smile. But one saluted. And that was enough. Chapter 58 What We Find in Exile. POV Clark Kent. 3 months passed like wind through a canyon. The city kept breathing, kept breaking, and rebuilding. I got better at not overstepping, at reigning in power, pacing my strength, learning to let others lead when they needed to. The world didn't need another Omni-Man. It needed something else. Something quieter. But when Mark called, his voice tighter than I'd heard in weeks, I knew this wasn't just another cleanup job. You free? He asked. I didn't ask what for. I'm with you. A portal opened an hour later. Cecil's tech, repurposed for deep space jumps with coordinates burned into the sequence like sacred script. Mark didn't say anything as we floated in the tunnel of light. He didn't look at me, either. Just kept his fists at his sides, jaw tight, eyes forward. I knew where we were going before I saw the stars. Thraxa. In the original timeline, Nolan fled here. Tried to make something of the ashes of his life. Took a throne. Built a legacy out of guilt. It wasn't redemption, but it was something. Or it had been. Now, I wasn't sure. The butterfly effect had wings in every corner of this new life. What if he wasn't here? What if the world had changed? We landed just above the atmosphere. The planet beneath us glowed with warm light, crimson oceans, golden spires, air thick with pollen and electricity. The city of Thraxa shimmered on the horizon, all curves and living metal, pulsing with soft energy. And standing on the platform before the palace. Him. Nolan. His armor was lighter now, ceremonial. His beard was fuller. His hair grayer. But there was no mistaking him. The way he stood. The weight in his shoulders. Mark stopped cold beside me, breath catching in his throat. Nolan turned. And froze. The wind was silent between us. Mark. That voice. Same as always. Mark's fists clenched. Tight. White-knuckled. I braced, expecting the worst. But instead of punching, he stepped forward. And broke. His shoulders shook. His breath hitched. And he hugged him. Full force. Arms locked. Face pressed into the armor. A noise halfway between a sob and a curse catching in his throat. Nolan stiffened. Then slowly wrapped his arms around his son. I missed you, Nolan said, voice low. Horse. Mark's words were muffled. Come back. Please. Nolan shook his head. I can't. Mark pulled back, face tight with confusion and grief. Why not? Nolan sighed and looked past us to the golden city behind him. When I left Earth, he said, I abandoned my post. My people would call it treason. The only reason I'm still alive is because they don't know where I am. He gestured behind him. I found this world. Thrax saw. They needed a ruler. I gave them one. And with my lifespan, they accepted it. Without question. He paused. I didn't mean to stay. But the longer I did, the more I felt like I should. Mark looked down. But you left. You left me and Mom. I know, Nolan said softly. You left. Mark shouted, suddenly shoving his father back. Nolan stumbled a step. Mark's fist cocked back and punched. Right in the chest. Nolan staggered, not from pain, but from surprise. He raised his arms defensively. Wait. Mark stepped back, lowering his fists. It was a test, he said. What? Mark huffed a breath. I wanted to see if you were really you. Not a shapeshifter. Not a Thraxan in disguise. Nolan blinked. Then chuckled. You've gotten stronger. You're still tougher than hell. I stayed quiet as they looked at each other. There was so much beneath the surface: rage, grief, love, guilt. But for now, it held. Come, Nolan said. We can talk somewhere quieter. We followed him through the golden gates into the heart of the palace, the walls humming with soft light. Thraxa's energy was different, warmer than Earth, slower in its pulse. I could feel it even through my skin. A living planet. He led us into a chamber set with crystalline furniture and long sweeping drapes of woven light. No guards. No weapons. Just space. We sat. And the conversation was only just beginning. Chapter 59: The Weight of Inheritance. POV Mark Grayson. I wasn't sure what I expected when Nolan said he had something to show me. Another throne room? A training hall? Maybe some mural he carved of himself saving a dying planet, just to show off how much he'd changed. I didn't expect a corridor lined with living crystal that pulsed gently beneath our feet. I didn't expect the way he walked slower as we went, not from weariness, but like he was preparing me. I definitely didn't expect what waited behind the door. He pressed his hand to a golden panel. The wall opened with a soft sigh, revealing a room that wasn't a throne room or a war chamber. It was a nursery. Clean. Warm. Toys strewn on the floor. A low bed layered in soft fabric, and murals along the walls of Thraxa, its sons, and its cities. A woman stood near the edge of the bed, humming low under her breath. And in the middle of the floor, toddling awkwardly around the mess of blocks and carved figures, was a child. Small. Round-cheeked. Bright-eyed. Purple-skinned. He looked up the moment we entered. Eyes wide and curious. One hand clutched a ragged little cloth doll, the other held steady to a carved wooden bird. The woman, her skin shimmering in the low light, long dark hair tied behind her shoulders, turned to look at me. Andressa, Nolan said, voice softer than I'd heard it in years. This is Mark. She inclined her head politely, though her eyes were cautious. Protective. The child waddled over and wrapped himself around Nolan's leg. Who's that? He asked in a light, bubbly accent. This, Nolan said, reaching down to lift him into his arms, is your brother. I stared. Felt something in my chest buckle, like the floor had just tilted without warning. His name is Oliver. My voice caught. You had another kid? Yes. You made a family here. Nolan didn't flinch. Yes. My fists clenched automatically. But I didn't swing. Not yet. Mark, Nolan said, stepping forward. He's young. He doesn't understand what he is. What we are. I didn't tell you before because I needed you to see him. Not as some abstract burden. But him. The person. Oliver looked at me with wide, fascinated eyes. I have a brother, he asked. I couldn't find my voice. Nolan continued, he's half Viltrumite, like you. But he's aging like a Thraxan for now. That won't last. Once his powers come in, he'll start to age like us. I managed, finally, the purple skin. Nolan nodded. It's considered a defect on Viltrum. They'd have executed him for it. I stared at him. At the boy clinging to his arm like it was the only thing in the universe that made sense. And I realized something cold and sharp. Nolan hadn't just run from his past. He'd built something to replace it. He's not just a symbol of your second chance, I said. He's your redemption. Nolan looked at me, solemn. He's innocent. And he's in danger. The Viltrumites are coming. They've already sent scouts. They'll be here. And when they find me, they'll kill me. Then him. Then whoever else gets in the way. I swallowed hard. And you want me to stop them? He stepped closer. No, he said. I want you to protect him. That landed differently. He wasn't asking me to save Thraxa. He didn't care if this world survived. He just wanted his son to live. He was begging me, in the only way a Viltrumite ever could. Even if I don't make it, Nolan added. You have to promise me. Oliver looked between us, oblivious. I'm strong too, he declared proudly. I can throw rocks. I tried to smile. It didn't work. Nolan lowered him gently, and the boy ran back to his toys, unaware of the weight crashing down between the two of us. I stared at my father. At the man who'd killed so many. The man who'd nearly destroyed me. And I said, I'll protect him. Not for Nolan. But for the kid who didn't ask for any of this. And who might need a brother more than a father. Chapter 60 Blood in the Sandlight. POV Mark Grayson. The wind screamed across the canyons of Thraxal like it remembered war. I held Oliver tight against my chest as we flew low over the crimson dunes, the weight of his tiny body terrifying in my arms. He was too small for this. Too new to the idea that people wanted to kill him for existing. Andressa flew beside me, faster than I expected, her silver hair flaring behind her like a ribbon of fire. Her eyes were hard, focused. She didn't ask questions. She just trusted me. We reached the cavern mouths beneath the plateau and slipped inside. The air was cooler here, dense and still. I laid Oliver down gently in the shade, listening to the thrum of my pulse in my ears. Then I heard it. A voice harsh and cutting echoing down the stone like a crack of lightning. You think hiding in a hole changes what you are? A Viltrumite. I turned, shielding Oliver with my body. He hovered in the entrance, tall and armored, the blood-red crest of Viltrum sharp across his chest. His eyes gleamed. His mouth curled. Andressa stepped forward, unarmed, hands raised. Wait. I didn't. I launched at him. The impact cracked the cave mouth wide open. We spiraled through rock and light, fists colliding midair. He blocked, I ducked, his boot caught my ribs and I crashed into a stone pillar, breath knocked out of me. He came in fast. Too fast. Then Andressa screamed not in fear but fury and threw a chunk of stone at his head. It shattered uselessly, but it distracted him long enough for me to drive a knee into his gut and grab Oliver. "Go!" I shouted to her. "Get deeper in!" We flew, skimming through the tunnels. Oliver sobbed into my shoulder, hands clutching at my collar. Then without warning the Viltrumite reappeared, ripping through stone like paper. His hand closed around my ankle. I slammed into a wall. Hard. Pain exploded across my back, vision doubling. Then Nolan arrived. He didn't speak. He didn't roar. He just hit the Viltrumite so hard the man's skull bounced off 3 walls before collapsing in a heap of blood and fractured bone. He stood there over the body, breathing hard, blood spattered across his armor. "He won't get up again," Nolan said flatly. I couldn't answer. I could barely stand. Together, we flew Andressa and Oliver deeper into the cave network. The boy was still shaking, still crying, but safe. I thought that was the worst of it. I was wrong. When we emerged from the caverns and returned to the city, the streets were red. Bodies everywhere. Thraxos people burned, broken, still. Nolan stopped midair. His breath hitched. I turned toward him, his hands clenched at his sides, his body shaking. He didn't say a word. He just turned and hit me. I crashed through a statue, tumbled across the sand, gasping. "What the hell?" I shouted. "You led them here," he bellowed. "You brought them to my people." I rose, stumbling. "You think I wanted this?" Before he could respond they arrived. 2 more Viltrumites. One tall and lean, the other wider, thicker. They hovered just above the devastation, hands red already. Nolan didn't wait. He slammed into the big one, driving him down into the courtyard. The ground erupted in a shower of blood and dust. The other came at me. I blocked once twice before he caught my shoulder and hurled me through a wall. I hit stone, skidded, and nearly blacked out. Then I heard him. A sonic boom. Faster than thunder. "Clark!" He hit the Viltrumite like a comet. No quips. No hesitation. Just power. They tumbled through the sky, a blur of fists and shockwaves. Clark moved with surgical precision, no wasted motion. He dodged, redirected, struck clean and hard, his heat vision arcing in short bursts. I scrambled back to my feet and joined the fight, catching the slimmer Viltrumite in the side and driving him into Nolan's waiting grip. We fought like gravity had been lifted. Every strike was death. Every second was earned. And Nolan fought like he had nothing left to lose. He took a blade through the side. He didn't flinch. He tore the arm off the one who stabbed him, then shattered his ribs with a single blow. Clark drove his opponent into the side of a tower, then blasted the remains with heat vision until the stone melted. They kept coming. But so did we. Chapter 62 The Sky is a Clock. POV Clark Kent. The blood hadn't dried yet. It was in the sand. In the stones. Spattered up the shattered walls of what used to be a quiet market plaza now choked with bodies. The Thraxan dead didn't scream. They just were limbs curled, chests caved, lives snatched away before they could even understand who had come. Mark stood in the center of it all, chest heaving, fists clenched so hard I could hear the skin straining. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Above us, the warships had long since vanished, but the air still trembled from their passing. The words that had been left behind hadn't faded. 100 days. That was all we got. Then they'd come back. Not with threats. With orders. With slaughter. And they'd expect Mark to help. He didn't move for a long time. When he did, it was to take slow, staggering steps toward a pile of Thraxan bodies. His hands hovered at his sides like they didn't know what to do. "They didn't even fight," he muttered. I stepped beside him. Quiet. Still. They didn't know how. They didn't get the chance to learn. He crouched, touching one of them gently, an elder, maybe, by Thraxan standards. Their skin was dark with cooling blood, eyes glassy but unshut. There was no ceremony here. No rites. Just aftermath. "They looked up and saw me," he said. "And then they died." I didn't argue. Because he was right. He stood again, hands shaking. "I thought bringing him here would fix something." "Your father?" "Yet." His laugh was dry, almost bitter. "The almighty Omni-Man. Living in exile. Playing house. Starting over like Earth didn't exist. And I just wanted to see him be better." He turned to me, face hollowed by guilt and rage and something that looked like mourning. "And now he's gone again. And this time? It's on me." I stepped in front of him. "No," I said. "It's on them. And they're coming back." "Yeah," he said. 100 days. He looked past me, toward the distant caverns where Andressa and Oliver were hiding. "They said I have to prepare the planet," he muttered. "You know what that means, right?" "I know what they think it means." His eyes locked on mine. "And you?" "I think we prepare it our way." Mark let out a slow breath, shoulders sagging. "I don't even know what that means." "It means we fight," I said. "Not to serve them. To stop them. To make sure no one else ends up like this." He didn't speak. But he didn't disagree. We stood there, surrounded by death, under a sky that would one day open again. The clock had started. And it wasn't ticking toward surrender. Chapter 63, The Long Flight Home. POV Clark Kent. A month passed. One long, slow turn of Thraxa's sun. The blood in the streets had long since dried, soaked into the red sands and cracked underfoot. The stench was gone. But grief still lingered in the cracks of the walls, in the silence between Thraxan voices, in the weight of the air when you breathed too deep and remembered who you couldn't save. We stayed. Not because we were asked. Because it felt wrong to leave yet. Mark and I worked side by side, rebuilding what we could. Hauling stone, lifting towers, reinforcing walls. We didn't speak much at first. But work had a way of making silence feel like company. Sometimes grief is best shared in motion. The Thraxans adapted quickly. They didn't mourn the way Earthlings did, no long funerals, no shrines, no open sobbing. Just stillness. Shared meals. One less voice at the table. And always, always, the child. Oliver. He followed Mark everywhere. Didn't say much at first. Just watched. Clung. Then slowly, bit by bit, he began to smile again. To laugh. To ask questions. And when he cried, it was always in his sleep. Andressa stayed in the main chambers. She moved slower with each day, her steps shorter, her breath lighter. She never complained. But we could see it. She was fading. It happened the day we were set to leave. The sky was clear. The ship was loaded. Oliver was dressed in a little flight tunic, clinging to a plush bird toy that had survived the first attack. Mark stood by the ramp, silent. I was strapping down the last supply crate when I heard her footsteps behind me. She was thinner. Pale. Barely upright. She carried herself like someone walking through water. She held Oliver's hand. He clutched hers back. "I'm not making it to your stars," she said to me, voice soft. I didn't answer. She knelt slowly, painfully, and kissed Oliver's forehead. He looked up at her, confused. She smiled, tired. Then looked at me. "You'll take care of him?" I met her eyes. And I nodded. She stood, stumbled, and Mark was there before she could fall. He caught her. Held her. Her hand brushed his cheek. "You're stronger than your father," she whispered. Then she pressed Oliver's hand into mine. And she was gone before the ship even took off. 1 month later, Earth. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe because we'd been living in starships and alien palaces. Maybe because it was home, and home always feels too fragile after war. Mark opened the door. I followed. Oliver walked between us, clutching his little toy, eyes darting around the hallway like he expected danger from the lamps or picture frames. "Mom!" Mark called. She stepped into the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. Her hair was pinned back. Her eyes, tired. She froze when she saw us, really saw us. Then she blinked. Once. Twice. Her mouth opened. "Mark." She moved to him. They hugged tighter than I'd ever seen them. The silence said everything. Then she noticed the boy. She looked down. He looked up. Mark pulled back and cleared his throat. "There's something you need to know." She stared. "About Dad," he added. Then, "This is Oliver." She didn't say anything for a long time. But her hand slowly reached out. And Oliver, shyly, stepped into it. And then she sank to her knees and held him, her face crumpling like glass hit by sunlight. And we stood there. Alive. Together. Not healed. But whole enough to begin. Chapter 64. The sun was just enough. POV Clark Kent. 3 months. It didn't feel like enough time for anything to settle, certainly not the world, not Mark, not Oliver, not me. But somehow, life slipped forward anyway. The Viltrumites hadn't returned. The clock still ticked, but the silence between each beat stretched long enough to pretend things were okay. Or at least normal. And tonight, things felt normal. Normal in a way that almost made me suspicious. We sat outside, a little rooftop patio above a downtown restaurant with string lights draped from corners and paper menus that flapped in the late summer breeze. Laughter rose from nearby tables. The scent of grilled meat hung in the air, and Mark had one hand on Amber's knee while she pointed out a constellation above us with the other. Eve sipped lemonade beside me, wearing a dress the color of storm clouds and a look in her eye that only I could read. We weren't superheroes anymore. Not really. Not since Thraxa. Not since Oliver. Not since we'd decided that someone else could carry the weight for once. No more patrols. No more Cecil. No more broken ribs and emergency jump drives. Just us. And for the first time in either of my lives, I wasn't itching to fly away. I was happy here. Amber laughed at something Mark said, leaning against his shoulder. Eve nudged my foot under the table. "You're staring again." "I'm thinking." "That's never a good sign." I gave her a sideways look. "You're the one who wanted a quiet life." "Quiet, yes. Brooding, no. You knew what you signed up for." She grinned. "I must have a thing for emotionally constipated alien men. Better than emotionally unstable ones." "Touché." Mark raised his glass. "To finally being able to breathe." Amber clinked hers against it. "I'll drink to that." We all toasted. Glasses raised under hanging lights. It could have been a dream. Should have stayed one. Because that's when I felt it. Pressure. Not sound. Not heat. Just a shift in the air. The wrong kind of stillness. Then a blur. A shadow across the rooftop. And a presence I remembered from the coalition files but had never seen in person. Anissa. She landed between our tables like she owned the sky. Her suit was dark, edged in viltrumite silver. Her hair was tied back tight, her face emotionless. Mark was already on his feet. Amber stood too, but slower. Eve didn't move. Her hand curled around my wrist under the table. I didn't react. Yet. Anissa's voice was calm. Too calm. Mark Grayson. He didn't flinch. You've been warned, she said. 100 days. That was your time. Mark's fists clenched. I remember. Then why haven't you prepared them? Amber looked at him. Mark, what is this? Anissa's gaze snapped to her. She moved fast. Too fast for anyone normal to track. Suddenly, she was beside Amber, hand lightly on her shoulder. Not hurting. Not yet. But threatening. Mark's eyes widened. Don't, he growled. I'm just making a point, Anissa said, voice like ice. You've had time to explain things to this world. You've chosen to pretend. That ends now. Mark looked ready to explode. I'll fight you, he said. Finally, Anissa said. But before she could move, Eve grabbed my arm. Tight. Not from fear. From reminder. I stood slowly. Anissa turned to me, almost grinning. And you? The other anomaly. Half the planet thinks you're a god. I'm not fighting. Pity. She looked at Eve. Then back to me. You've gone soft. I've made peace. Coward's word. I took a breath. You want to drag Mark through a war? Fine. That's his choice. But don't pretend he doesn't know what he's walking into. Mark's jaw clenched. Clark? I said what I meant, I replied. Eve stood beside me now, her hand slipping into mine. Anissa's eyes flicked between us. You two have quit. Yes, Eve said. And we're not apologizing. Anissa tilted her head. Then smiled just a sliver of it. I'll remember that. Then she turned. And vanished into the night. Mark exhaled hard, fists still shaking. Amber stared at him. Who was that? Someone who wants me to help destroy the world. Amber didn't blink. Didn't scream. Just nodded once. Eve looked at me. You meant it, right? Yes. No turning back. I already turned, I said. And I'm not looking over my shoulder. She squeezed my hand. And for a moment, just a moment, the night felt quiet again. Even if we both knew it wouldn't last. Chapter 65 The Quiet I Chose. POV Clark Kent. The city had settled into itself by the time I flew her home. Late night lights burned behind half-closed curtains. Street lamps blinked through the mist of recent rain, their reflections catching in the puddles and painting the sidewalks with soft fire. Cars moved with the deliberate rhythm of people who were finally done rushing, done chasing. Everything smelled like petrichor and worn asphalt clean, in that strange, tired way cities never quite achieve in daylight. Eve sat beside me, one hand loosely gripping my wrist, the other tucked into the front pocket of her faded hoodie. No costume. No tension. Her eyes followed the city below as we coasted just above rooftop height. Not like a bird. Like a sigh. We didn't talk much on the way back. We didn't need to. I landed softly on her building's balcony. She stepped down onto the wooden deck with the same practiced motion as always, like she didn't just trust me to hold her in the sky, but had stopped thinking about it entirely. She paused just before sliding the glass door open. "You sure?" she asked. It wasn't a question about her. It was about me. About us. About everything we'd agreed on in that unspoken moment when Anissa's shadow passed over our table like a sword waiting to fall. "I'm sure," I said. She studied me for a beat longer. Then she kissed me. Not like it was the first or the last, just a reminder that it was real. And then she disappeared into her apartment. I stayed on the balcony for a few minutes more, watching the lights beyond the trees, the blinking antenna tower 3 districts over, the faint outline of stars not completely erased by the city glow. I didn't want to fly away just yet. But eventually I did. Quietly. Slowly. Not soaring. Just floating. My apartment wasn't big. Never needed to be. 2 rooms, 1 window that faced east, a fridge that hummed a little too loud and never kept anything truly cold. The kind of place you rent because you know you're never really going to live in it. But tonight, it felt just right. I dropped my jacket on the chair, ran a hand through my hair, and stood in the dark for a long time. No alarms. No glowing beacons on the wall. No alerts from Cecil. No flare of heat vision behind my eyes begging to be unleashed. Just quiet. And I chose this. I walked to the window and leaned against the frame, my breath fogging the glass just slightly. The moon was a clean white curve above the skyline. Traffic lights flicked between red and gold without reason. Some drunk kids laughed across the street, tripping over their own shadows, not a care in the world. I used to envy people like that. Now I pitied them a little. But not from above. Not anymore. When I was Shredder, life was not war, but it felt like one. Not that I fought in anything noble or televised or sacred. I wasn't a soldier or a vigilante or a legend. I was just a man. One of them. Someone with a job that barely paid enough to keep the lights on. Rent due on the 1st. Coffee brewed cheap. Hands always cold in winter. Dinners eaten standing up. Arguments that led nowhere. Dreams held like glass you weren't allowed to drop but also couldn't ever afford to frame. I didn't suffer more than anyone else. But it wasn't peace. It was a long, grinding ache. A loop. Wake, work, rot, repeat. And every time I tried to claw my way out of it, every idea, every little plan, every time I told myself this is the month something changes, it fell apart. Slowly. Quietly. The way life erodes a shoreline grain by grain until one day you wake up and realize the ocean has taken your entire house. I didn't die saving someone. I didn't die with regrets. I just died. And woke up here. I didn't ask to be Clark Kent. Didn't ask to be a Kryptonian. To have strength that could move mountains. Eyes that could see through lies. A heart that pulsed with sunlight and memory. But once I understood what I was. Once I understood who I was living beside. I thought, this is Mark's world. He's the hero. He's the one the story needs. So I helped. I stood beside him. Took the punches. Made the decisions that might haunt him later so he didn't have to. But I always knew this wasn't mine to finish. He's the sun in the center of this system. The gravity that pulls all the scattered pieces of this world back into place. The one who learns, who breaks, who fights, who chooses again and again to be better even when no one deserves it. And I wanted quiet. Not because I was tired. But because I never got it the first time. I wanted mornings where no one screamed my name. Evenings where the only thing flying through the air was a plastic bag caught in the wind. I wanted to cook dinner without wondering if the stove would survive a seismic punch. I wanted to kiss someone without worrying if the world was about to split open behind her. And I wanted that for her, too. For Eve. For the woman who rebuilt everything around her and never asked for a thank you. She could have ruled the world. But she wanted something else. So did I. So we stepped back. We didn't abandon the fight. We chose something different. A life with softer stakes. A life that maybe, finally, could be lived. And Mark? He'll be okay. He always is. Because no matter how many times the world ends, he always finds a way to put it back together again. I turned off the light and let the night have me. Because this was peace. And I'd waited 2 lives to earn it. Chapter 66 The Eyes That Watch. POV Mark Grayson. She didn't yell. Amber never did. She sat on the park bench like she had something folded tight and quiet inside her, something that had been growing across too many nights without answers. Her fingers picked at the edge of a paper cup, coffee gone cold a long time ago. Mark stood in front of her, hands half in his jacket pockets, weight shifting between his feet like he wanted to fly away but wouldn't let himself. She finally looked up. I can't keep pretending, Mark. He swallowed hard. You're not pretending, he said, barely above a whisper. Amber didn't sigh. Didn't cry. She just blinked once, slowly. Yes, I am, she said. Every time you leave in the middle of dinner. Every time I see your name on the news. Every time I try to tell myself that maybe this time, it'll be different. I'm doing my best. I know, she said. And that was what made it worse. He sat down beside her, too close to not feel the distance. I don't know what you want me to say. Amber turned toward him, finally meeting his eyes. I don't want you to say anything. I want you to live the life you need to live. But I can't be the girl you keep circling back to when you forget how much it hurts to be human. The words landed harder than any punch he'd taken in orbit. He looked away. Birds moved in the trees above them, too far to hear. The park was nearly empty. The wind carried dry leaves across the path in soft rattles. I still love you, he said, quietly. Amber smiled. Not cruel. Not broken. I know. She stood. Smoothed her coat. And walked away. Mark sat still for a long time, staring at the cup she left behind. And when he finally stood, he didn't fly. He just walked. POV Clark Kent. The mountain was cold. It always was, especially at night, when the wind screamed through the pines like it had something to say. I sat cross-legged on a flat rock outcrop, high above the city, high above the noise. My shirt was already off, my eyes narrowed at the stars above, glowing faint and soft through thin strands of cloud. I wasn't up here for the quiet. I was up here to see. I took a deep breath. Then turned my vision upward straight up into the black. X-ray was never meant for this. It worked best in close ranges, short bursts, calculated penetration. But I was pushing it now. Pushing past air, past heat, past noise, trying to feel that edge in my skull where sight became pressure. Upward. Deeper. Further. I caught the glimmer of satellites. A few I recognized stationary, outdated, trailing flickers of heat. Others moved faster. Brighter. Some I hadn't seen before. I focused harder, peeling back layers. The clouds disappeared. Then the thermosphere. Then the scatter of junk that drifted like ghosts between radio silence. Still not enough. Still not far enough. I wanted to see into space. Not because I had orders. Not because the world was in danger. Because I needed to. Because weakness had haunted me. Not the kind people meant when they talked about failing a test or losing a fight. The kind that let you miss something important. The kind that made you a second too slow, a step too soft. The kind that let people die. I thought about Thraxa. About Andressa. About Nolan. About Mark. About the crater Omni-Man left the day he told the truth with his fists. And I thought about how no one saw it coming. I thought, never again. I kept pushing. Heat welled behind my eyes. Sharp. Tingling. I grunted, forced the beam back, reined it in just before it turned to fire. Still nothing. But maybe tomorrow I'd see farther. I sat back, sweating now, heartbeat calm but steady. I didn't want to fight anymore. But I still wanted to be ready. Because if there was one lesson I'd learned in 2 lives, it was this. You don't get to choose what comes for you. Only how prepared you are when it arrives. Weakness was the original sin. Not because it made you bad, but because it made you blind. And I refused to be blind again. I stood, brushed the grit from my palms, and looked up once more. Somewhere beyond those stars, a warship was probably turning. A countdown ticking. And I'd be ready when it did. Chapter 67 Conditional Peace. POV Clark Kent. The door wasn't locked. Cecil didn't knock. I heard his boots before I saw him, polished leather over concrete tile, slow and steady, like the man had all the time in the world to make an entrance no one wanted. My apartment was clean, mostly. Quiet, always. One window cracked open to let in the night air, the smell of rain on stone. Cecil sat down on the opposite end of the couch before I could tell him not to. He didn't take off his sunglasses. I didn't offer him coffee. So, he said. So. His eye twitched once, barely perceptible. You've been hard to find. I wasn't hiding. No, you were just unavailable. I didn't reply. He reached into the breast pocket of his jacket and pulled out a thin file, no markings, no seals, just old-fashioned paper, folded and creased. He didn't hand it to me. Didn't open it, either. Just let it rest in his gloved hand like a leash he wasn't sure whether to tug or drop. Mark's been busy, he said casually. I know. You keeping tabs? I shrugged. Some. He waited. When I didn't elaborate, he nodded, slow. You really meant it, huh? Meant what? This whole retirement fantasy. I looked at him. No fantasy. Just a decision. You decided not to help. I decided not to chase threats like I'm still something the world deserves. Cecil leaned back slightly, legs crossed. He wasn't angry. Not yet. But something behind those lenses watched me sharper than usual. Funny, he said. Because I remember you standing in front of half of Viltrumite fleet and telling me the Earth was worth bleeding for. That was before. Before what? Before I figured out bleeding doesn't always mean saving. His lips twitched. You think the world doesn't need you? I said nothing. Cecil sat in the silence like it was a chessboard, letting it play out. When he spoke again, his voice was a notch quieter. Do you remember Wyoming? I did. Do you remember what you said when the dome came down, when those kids started choking on their own lungs? Cecil. You said not this time. You said, they die if I wait. And then you ripped a hole through 2 city blocks and dragged them out one by one. I didn't flinch. You did that without orders. Without planning. Because it was the right thing. He leaned forward now, elbows on knees. So tell me what's changed. I stared out the window. The skyline pulsed quietly, red lights blinking across rooftops, cranes swinging in the wind. I've changed. That's not a real answer. It's the only one I have. He drummed his fingers on the file. People still scream. I know. They still bleed. I know. And you still can help. I looked at him, voice flat. That's the problem. He didn't respond. Not right away. Then, after a moment, so what, you're just going to sit here, toast bread, let the world burn? I didn't say that. No, you just implied it very poetically. I stood, walked toward the window, rested one hand on the frame. I'm not saying I'll never lift a hand. Then what are you saying? I turned, and my voice was calm. Not tired. Not angry. Just firm. I'll help if it touches my peace. Cecil blinked. I kept going. If the danger reaches me. If it threatens the small life I've built. If it hurts the people I've chosen. Then I'll move. Not before. He was quiet. I'm not a guard dog, I said. Not a beacon. Not a god. I've paid my price. He looked at me for a long time. And then, to his credit, he nodded. Not agreement. But understanding. You've changed, he said again, this time with something like respect. I didn't nod back. Because I didn't need to. He rose, straightened his coat, left the file on the table without looking at it again. Before he reached the door, he paused. I won't call again, he said. Good. But when they come, he added, and they will, just make sure you're not the only one still standing. Then he left. The door closed behind him with a soft click. And I stood in the quiet, still watching the lights blink red across the sky. Chapter 68 In His Brother's Sky. POV Clark Kent. It was late. Not quite midnight, but close enough that the moon sat high and full over the apartment roof, and the only sounds from outside were the lonely coughs of wind across the alley and the occasional distant hiss of a bus making its last rounds. I was halfway through an old paperback, something dusty with dog-eared corners and a hero who didn't wear a cape, when the phone on my nightstand buzzed. I didn't need to check the screen. Only one person still called me directly this late. I thumbed the answer button and leaned back against the headboard. Mark. Hey. His voice was tight. Not panic, not fear. But close enough to tension that I could hear the weight of something on the edge. You all right? I asked. He hesitated. Then, it's Oliver. I sat up straighter. Something happened. Yeah, he breathed. He flew. I blinked. Like, actually. Straight up. Through the window. Was he aiming? Barely. He was, mad. Or scared. Or something. He'd been complaining all day about weird tingling in his chest and arms, and then when I told him he couldn't eat the last 2 cupcakes, boom. He launched. I exhaled slowly, processing. Mark continued. I chased him. Took me a full minute to catch up. When I did, he was just hovering over the lake, arms flailing, trying to cry and breathe and not plummet. And then get this, he started glowing. Glowing. Yet. Like, light under his skin. Same as Eve sometimes, but not pink. Like fireflies. Gold. He okay now? Yet. Passed out in my arms on the way back. Slept for 3 hours. Just woke up and asked me if he broke anything. I smiled faintly at that. Mark didn't. Clark, he said. He's 5. I know. He shouldn't be able to fly. Maybe not. He shouldn't be able to punch a hole through drywall either. But I watched him do that last week when he was mad about bedtime. Mark. What if he hurts someone? He won't. You don't know that. I do. He was quiet on the other end. I stood, walked to the window, and cracked it open to let the chill air in. He's part Viltrumite, I said. Part Thraxan. Maybe part something even stranger. Of course his powers came early. You didn't. No. Neither did I. I wasn't born here, I said. He was. He's breathing earth air. Drinking its water. Learning language and physics and control before his bones are fully formed. It's going to hit faster for him. Mark sighed again. So what do I do? I thought about that. About what my answer would have been 2 years ago, back when the suit still felt like duty and not history. And then I said, let him be. Mark scoffed. That's it. Let him be, I repeated. Don't shove training at him like it's punishment. Don't make him fear what he is. He's 5, Mark. Teach him not to break things. Teach him not to run when he's scared. And then, when he's ready, teach him how to fly straight. Silence again. He's not a soldier, I added. No, Mark said. He's a kid. And he needs to stay one. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, finally, I keep thinking about what happens next. Next. When they come. When the Viltrumites show up. I leaned against the window frame. I've been thinking about that too. You still feel them out there? Sometimes. When I look hard enough. Mark exhaled again. I don't want him to be part of that. Then don't let him be. You think I can just stop fate? Yeah, I said. That's what being a brother means. The next day, I flew to their place. Not because Mark asked me to. But because I wanted to see for myself. Their house was quiet. Cozy. Nothing remarkable from the outside. One of those split-level homes in a newer development just off the suburbs, clean lawns, short fences, neutral paint jobs. You wouldn't think a superhuman lived here. Let alone 2. Oliver was in the backyard. Floating 3 feet off the ground, spinning slowly in a wide, lazy circle while giggling to himself and talking to a beetle trapped in a mason jar. Mark stood on the porch, arms folded. He's been doing that since breakfast. I nodded. Oliver noticed me, grinned wide, and called out, Clark. Hey, kid. He zipped through the air like a comet, overshot me by a few feet, corrected, and landed on my shoulder like he was a bird trying to perch but not quite sure of the weight. You smell like clouds. I've been in them all morning. Can I go with you next time? Not yet. Can I go soon? Maybe. Mark smiled despite himself. He likes you. I shrugged. Everyone likes me. Oliver beamed, then immediately took off again, diving into a patch of dirt and starting to dig like a dog. He's not scared anymore, Mark said. He shouldn't be. He broke a glass with his breath yesterday. He'll learn. Mark watched him dig, his smile fading. You really think he'll be okay? Only if you don't let fear teach him how to live. He looked at me. And something behind his eyes, tired and bright and hopeful, all at once settled. Okay, he said. We didn't say much more. Just stood in the sun and watched the boy fly loops over the garden and laughed when he accidentally knocked over a tomato cage and apologized to the plant. And for the first time in a while, the sky didn't feel like a threat. It felt like promise. Chapter 69: A Familiar Violence. POV: Clark Kent. It was supposed to be quiet. We picked the spot because it didn't look like anywhere important, just a little sliver of public garden on the side of a hill, ringed by maples, lit by a single flickering lamp overhead. The city sat lower than us, far enough that the skyline blurred a little in the heat, and for once, I didn't hear sirens or engines or the crackle of distant violence. Eve sat barefoot on the blanket beside me, a sandwich in her lap, her eyes half-lidded with a kind of peace that had taken us both months to grow into. She was humming under her breath, quiet, unconscious, like she forgot I could hear everything. I liked that. It meant she was comfortable. I liked a lot of things about tonight. The simple ones. Her foot nudging my shin. The rustle of leaves. That cheap soda she liked that tasted more like metal than cherries. I'd had bigger days. Louder ones. But not better. And then, without fanfare, the sky split. Not dramatically. No thunder. No flash of light. Just pressure. The kind I remembered. The kind I always remembered. She felt it too. I saw her head tilt, that tiny wrinkle form between her eyebrows as she stopped mid-bite and looked skyward. I was already turning. Already pulling her into my arms. She didn't argue. Didn't panic. Just blinked once and said, "That wasn't thunder." "No," I said. "It wasn't." I carried her up, into the tree canopy first, then past it, until the park and hill and city peeled away beneath us and the world opened into the ink-black distance of evening. And then I saw him. Just one. Mark. Not our Mark. But still Mark. Right age. Right build. Different uniform. Darker colors. No smile. He hovered with arms slack at his sides, head tilted, mouth curled faintly like the whole planet amused him. I didn't need to ask who sent him. Didn't need to run analysis. I remembered this one. The anomaly. The one who snapped too early. The one Angstrom pulled from a world where everyone betrayed him, where trust meant knives in the dark. He wasn't here to scout. He wasn't here to warn. He was here to hurt. This wasn't conjecture. I remembered. This was Angstrom's game. The first test. One invincible to soften the edges before the storm. I felt the shift in Eve's body as she realized the same. She didn't ask questions. She lit up. A soft crack of violet gold light shimmered across her skin as she activated her field, still tucked against my chest. "Put me down," she said, calm. I hesitated. "Clark," she said again. "Let me down." So I did. She hovered 5 feet in front of me, bright now, her breath steady, her shoulders squared. She didn't scream a challenge. She didn't need to. The other Mark moved first. Straight at her. And she met him. No hesitation. No flinch. Just movement fluid and fast as light. Her shield flared into a hard wall that cracked on impact but didn't break. He rebounded, caught himself midair, came back faster, fists aimed at her head. She shifted sideways, caught him in a swirl of force, and hurled him down toward the trilene. He recovered faster than she expected. Looped up. Came at her from above. I started to move, but she was already there. The sky lit pink as her counter field bloomed around his punch, absorbed the force, and pushed him back with a spin so fast he tumbled midair. She was better than I remembered. Stronger now. Not just power. Precision. The anomaly came again, snarling this time his punch cracked air, sonic boom trailing behind. She dropped low, flicked a spear of light up from the earth, and caught him in the ribs. He screamed. Not from pain. Frustration. He wasn't used to resistance. Eve hovered level again. I floated just behind her. "Need help?" I asked. She didn't look at me. "Only if I ask." "Got it." I drifted back. And watched. They clashed again, her constructs slicing through the dark like wire, his fists breaking them apart one by one. He got closer this time. Landed a glancing blow across her shoulder that spun her midair. She righted herself fast. Sent a flurry of discs his way. 3 he dodged, the 4th caught him in the thigh and exploded, dropping him through the cloud line. She followed him down. I kept pace above them. Low enough to catch her if she fell. Far enough to not get in her way. The fight hit the riverbank hard, trees cracked, earth cratered. He came up first, blood at the corner of his mouth, hair wild. She rose slower. Breathing hard. But not backing down. He screamed this time. A battle cry. And she met him again. This time I moved. Not to fight. Just to tilt the odds. A breath of heat, vision low, tight, just behind his knee. He flinched. Missed his angle. She capitalized, caught his arm mid-swing, twisted, and slammed him into a wall of her own making. It collapsed. He didn't rise. He groaned. Face bloodied. Breath ragged. Still alive. Still dangerous. Eve landed beside him, summoned cuffs of light, and locked him down. Her chest rose and fell. Slowly. She turned to me. Eyes tired. Not triumphant. Just done. I hate alternate timelines, she muttered. I floated down beside her. I know. She didn't ask how I knew. Didn't ask what I'd seen or remembered. She didn't have to. She just leaned into my side and closed her eyes for a breath. And we stood there, together, while the night held its breath again. Chapter 70 Beneath the Shield. POV Clark Kent. I carried her quietly. No words, no flurry of apologies. Just an arm beneath her knees, her cheek resting against my collarbone, and the night parting around us like something too fragile to resist. The fight was over, whatever that even meant anymore, but my mind was racing anyway. I'd seen the way she slowed near the end. Not just winded. Wounded. She didn't say anything. Didn't drop or gasp or falter. But I knew. I knew from the way she shifted her weight when she landed, the faint flicker of her shield when the other mark had struck just above her ribs. Kinetic light could absorb the blunt force, but it couldn't dull the trauma underneath. She took it. She always did. And she never told anyone. So I flew. Not home. Not to the tower or her apartment or anywhere familiar. Just, away. We found a service station 10 miles outside the city, abandoned, half collapsed, overgrown at the edges. The sign had blown out years ago, the roofline sagged like old shoulders, and the front door was gone entirely. Perfect. I sat down beside the doorframe and nudged what was left of the latch open. The inside smelled like rust and dust and moss, the tiled floor cracked like a dry lake bed. Clark, she muttered as I carried her in, I can walk. I know. You don't have to. I know. She didn't fight me after that. The back room had a washroom. No mirror, no soap. Just cracked tile, faded green walls, and a sink that hadn't worked since before smartphones were invented. I eased her down onto the edge of the counter. She hissed through her teeth, soft, involuntary. The left side of her body folded in slightly, protective. She didn't meet my eyes. Let me look, I said gently. I'm fine. You're not. I've had worse. That's not the point. Her lips tightened. Then, slowly, she leaned back. Arms braced. Still not looking at me. I turned on my X-ray vision, not wide, not deep. Just enough to skim the surface. A shimmer passed across her torso, flesh translucent, bone outlined faint and pale. There it was. Just beneath the skin under her left breast a long, ragged mark. The tissue was inflamed. A faint crack along one rib, likely hairline. Nothing collapsed. No fragments. But it had struck deep. Kinetic trauma that had burst the blood vessels beneath and nearly cracked bone. She wasn't bleeding internally. But she was close. I turned it off. Looked her in the eye. You have a fracture. I figured. You need to let me treat it. I can do it. Not here. Not now. She looked at me finally. Really looked. Not defensive. Just tired. And maybe quietly grateful. She nodded. Okay, she said. I moved slowly. No rush. No command. I slid my hands gently to the hem of her shirt, eyes on hers the entire time. She didn't look away. Didn't flinch. But her breath caught a little. May I? I asked. She nodded again. I lifted the fabric, inch by inch. The injury bloomed as the skin was revealed red, darkening at the edges, bruised across a stretch of ribs like a lightning scar beneath the surface. It wasn't beautiful. But it was real. And it made my stomach tighten with something that felt like anger and guilt and awe all at once. She winced as I touched the edge, just under the bruise. My hand was warm. Hers moved instinctively to her chest, trying to shield herself not from me, but from the cold, the air, the vulnerability. I'm sorry, I murmured. She shook her head. I'm not embarrassed, she said softly. I just hate feeling like glass. You're not glass, I said. She looked down at my hand, then back up at me. You say that like you believe it. I do. She studied me a moment longer. Then dropped her hand. I rested my palm lightly against the swelling. Careful. Measured. Just enough to let the warmth radiate, the pressure steady. My other hand slid behind her back, holding her upright. She leaned into me, cheek against my shoulder, eyes closed. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Just the hush of breath. The rhythm of two people trying not to be afraid of what it meant to need each other. I let the heat seep from my hand low-grade, controlled. Kryptonian muscle work moving in slow pulses, coaxing the bruising down, encouraging the fracture to stabilize. She exhaled slowly. Then murmured, "You're not supposed to still care." I know. You stepped back. I did. You said you didn't want to be a hero anymore. I don't. Then why are you doing this? I thought about that. And said, quietly, because I never stopped being yours. She was silent again. Then, even if I go back to the fight, I'll catch you when you fall. And if I don't fall, I'll still be there. She opened her eyes. Looked at me. I'm scared. I nodded. Me too. She leaned forward, forehead touching mine. And for a long moment, there was nothing but warmth between us. Not fire. Not war. Just the heat of being alive. Chapter 71 The Things That Happen Quietly. POV Clark Kent. The washroom was still. The kind of still that follows a storm, empty and echoing, like the world forgot it had just been breaking in half 15 minutes ago. The mirror was cracked. The faucet hadn't worked in years. The cracked tile under my boots still smelled faintly of mildew and old rust. Eve hadn't moved from where I'd settled her, back braced against the wall, knees slightly bent, one arm folded under her chest like she could hold herself together with sheer will. She wasn't bleeding anymore. That was something. The swelling along her ribs had gone down a little since I'd passed warmth through her. But she wasn't in any shape to fly or stand or even pretend the pain wasn't still gnawing at her lungs when she breathed too deep. I stood just outside the doorway, not pacing, just still. Watching the threshold. Every so often my eyes drifted upward. The ceiling creaked softly as the wind rolled through the broken panels above. I tilted my head, closed my eyes, and opened my vision. X-ray. Focused. Narrow. Wide. I turned it outward through the broken wall, across the parking lot, up the hillside, through the canopy. Nothing. The other Mark, the anomaly, was still unconscious where we'd left him. No readings nearby. No movement. But I kept looking. The thing about Angstrom was he never sent one ripple. He sent ripples that made more. And sometimes they came slow. Sometimes they came quiet. I scanned a quarter mile in every direction, layer by layer. Bone structure. Power signals. Blood flow. No hostiles. No anomalies. Just birds, wind, and silence. I turned it off and breathed out. The silence behind me shifted. A wince. A breath held too long. I turned. Eve looked pale. Her eyes were glassy with fatigue, but she was still awake. Still Eve. Still pretending it hurt a little less than it actually did. Her fingers curled at the hem of her shirt, then let go. She shifted. Stopped. Then said, voice low, Clark. Yet. She exhaled slowly. I have to pee. There was a pause. I blinked. Okay. I mean, I really have to pee. Another pause. And then her eyes flicked away like she was trying to phase through the wall. Sorry, she muttered. You don't have to be sorry. I'm not trying to be dramatic. You're not. It's just, her hand gestured weakly to her ribs. I don't think I can. Get up. I crossed the room in 2 steps and crouched beside her. You want help? She looked at me, cheeks coloring just slightly. Not really. But I think I need it. Okay. A beat passed. Then, quietly, this is mortifying. I didn't smile. I didn't tease. I just reached for her hand. It's not. Clark, I've faced down alien warlords with fewer nerves. I lifted her carefully, one arm under her back, the other beneath her knees. She tensed a little, still guarding the fracture. I'll be fast, I said gently. Just don't, look. I won't. She leaned her head against my shoulder, breathing shallow. We moved slowly to the stall. No door. No handle. Just a partially intact frame and rust-stained porcelain. I set her down as delicately as I could, keeping one hand on her back. Need me to turn around? Yes. Please. I did. I heard fabric shifting. A quiet hiss. A sharp breath. A pause. Then a muttered, "You're still not looking, right? Promise." She sighed. Everything after that was mechanical. Awkward. Necessary. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. But I could feel the tension in the silence, how much she hated this. Not because I was here. Because she couldn't do it herself. When she was done, she tapped the back of my arm lightly. All clear. I turned just enough to crouch again. She hesitated. Can you help me with? I understood. She didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need her to. I helped. No words. Just hands. Just care. When she was upright again, her arms clutched my shoulder a little tighter. I carried her back, settled her gently on the counter. Neither of us spoke for a minute. Then she laughed. Quietly. Hollow. I swear to God, if you tell anyone. I won't. I mean it. I'll atomize you. You've got 5 more ribs to crack before that. She snorted. And then sighed. Her voice was softer after that. I hate feeling helpless. I leaned against the wall beside her. You're not helpless. I couldn't even walk. You still lit up half the sky with your powers 20 minutes ago. She looked at me sideways. You always know exactly what to say. I practice in the mirror. She let her head rest against my shoulder, warm and solid. You really didn't look. I meant it when I said I wouldn't. Thank you. We stayed like that for a while. No more embarrassment. No more pain we could name. Just breath. And heartbeat. And the quiet aftermath of a fight neither of us had been ready for but survived anyway.